Hey, everybody, welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast on the Love Thy Nerd podcast network. I'm Hector Miray of Faith and Fandom, and today I'm joined by Deborah Ulmer of Colors of Fandom and Dee's Kitchen Sweet Treats Vegan Eats.
Yeah.
Good grief, that's a mouthful. Um, who's going to be joining me
Dee's
today?
Kitchen is just
Dee's
good.
Kitchen, Dee's Kitchen. But I know you got to say the whole thing. You got to say it with like some gusto too. But excited to have you here today. But if you're joining us here, you can there's always lots of other podcasts to check out and lots of other places to find them. If you're listening to this in your ear holes, you can also watch this on YouTube over at the dedicated channel for this at YouTube at Faith and Fandom LTN. You can also check this out on the Glue Network, GLU, on Roku TVs. And also on LTN radio at some different slots as well. So lots of great ways to check this out. But Dee, thank you for taking the time to be here with me and for putting up with me annoying you, trying to track you down for this, for my bad scheduling and all the things with that. So thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking too. And yeah, trying to figure out our schedules.
I think the last time we even podcasted was you trying to convince me that Thor 3 wasn't bad. Uh,
Ragnarok is
yeah,
the best. Oh my gosh, we're not gonna get on that soapbox, so I can't
but
believe.
I remember like I think we were either at Fayetteville or Raleigh, and I think it was SuperCon, or maybe I can't remember, but it was one of those shows, and I just pulled out a microphone and recorded you, and as we talked about, that uh it's become a, how like sometimes you use the same passwords for everything.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say what it is because somebody might be smart enough on here to actually go with it. But the majority of passwords to everything in my household and my family's stuff is a disparaging remark about Thor 3. And that's just like
Yeah.
my kids always remember, they're like, yeah, it's that. um just because it was whatever. But I think that's the last time we've actually got to be on a conversation together. But to ask you, do you remember where we met?
Oh,
Don't feel bad if you
wow.
don't, because I don't either.
Yeah. I mean it had to been at uh
NC Comic Con.
NC Comic Con. It had to been at NC Comic Con.
Well,
I don't know which one though. I don't know if it was Bull City or Oak City though.
me either. And I go through my like one of my like daily rituals is at once it turns midnight, I go through my memories from the year before or the years before on Facebook. And there was just one yesterday of us at an NC Comic Con, and I want to say it was 2015 or 2016. Now I'm not saying that's the first one because I think my first one there was 2014, but either way, it's been a decade and some change. That I've known you and been in your bubble and got to see you do different stuff. And I think one of the things that, just acknowledgement is I think you are probably the most dedicated Dead fan that I know personally. Maybe you might be tied with a kid named Xavier. But is that still your fandom of choice, or where are you at?
I mean, it is my biggest fandom, I would say. You know, I do have some other ones that have come since then, or that maybe match up. But as far as like me sticking to it and still doing panels, hosting panels on the Walking Dead universe every year and like still watching all the spinoffs no matter
I
how
was going to ask
long.
you if you're still doing the spin-offs.
Oh yeah, I'm still doing the spinoffs. I still collecting stuff and yeah, I don't think it's ever gonna yeah not be a thing for me. I don't think I ever get tired of it. Just because I love like the story and the characters, even if, all of the shows and episodes aren't up to par, I'm still gonna enjoy what I enjoy in it.
So I don't think I've made it past I could be wrong, but in my memory, I don't think I made it 2 episodes past Carl dying.
Yeah, that was like the last like mass exodus, I think.
Yeah.
Well,
Glenn was
no, no. I think um maybe Rick took a little bit more people when
yeah.
Rick got taken, but like as far as like a huge number, I think it was Carl. After Glenn, it
Yeah, I was
was
gonna say
Carl.
Glenn was the like, oh, we're in the wrong place. I'm out for a lot of people. And that's one of the issues I've got autographed by Kirkman. Is the Glenn issue, the holographic one when he was at
Hmm.
NC Comic Con. Like I got
Yeah.
that one autographed and I was just like, yeah, no. And every time because I end up running into the dude who plays Abraham quite a bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so like I was in Tennessee this past August and he was just literally next to me in line to get coffee and we're just standing at the bar waiting to get our coffee and I just look over at him and I kid you not, I looked over him and dead saw his exit moment and I'm like, let me like look over here
Oh
because
no.
I was just like, but so
I've never seen that scene. So, like, we had Color Fandom had a watch party, and because we used to do in-person watch parties for the premieres and the season finales for Game of Thrones and Walking Dead. And so we had this big, big party for this one because we knew it was going to reveal who died. And because I love spoilers, it just because of my anxiety, I have
it can
to
help.
see it helps. It helps a lot, especially for characters, that I get attached to and things like that. And it doesn't like, ruin the experience for me, knowing spoilers. Um, so I knew who was gonna die. I knew it was like a dual, death. So when the scene came up, well, I guess both of those scenes, I turned well, actually leaned into Amy. She came with she came with me. She's not well, she was a Walking Dead fan, but she was like my support along with everybody in the room. But I just leaned on her because I didn't want something with body horror, especially head body horror. I don't, can't get with. I like horror, but I can't get with that. So I never, and then when it comes on, like, because I do rewatches and I watch, the Walking Dead channel, but I always like avoid that part of the episode. Sometimes I don't even watch the episode, but like, so I've heard it, that scene, both of those scenes, like, I guess the whole full scene of the deaths, but I've never seen it at all.
I think you're probably making the right life choice because that was, 8 o'clock in the morning, Tennessee, and I'm barely awake, and I look over and I see Abraham, and I'm like, mm-mm, too early, and so you're doing right. Uh, yeah. So you mentioned that some other fandoms have kind of caught up or are in that near near your Walking Dead fandom. Like, what are the other ones?
I think the um well, I guess the vampire genre as a whole, I think what I've always liked the vampires, like grew up, I was a Buffy fan ever since like it came on, Buffy and Angel. And like I collect everything. But like I think when I started organizing, I had a big mass room organization earlier this year, and I realized that I have a lot of vampire related things, um, and including like um, the Anne Rice universe, and with it coming on,
Are
with
you
them
enjoying
adapting
the
it.
Are you enjoying the new Anne Rice stuff?
Oh yes. Yeah. So with all of that, yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, I see what my like because I've always liked Universal monsters
Right.
in each, ever since in all the iterations of it, but I'm like, oh, okay, I guess vampires are my my big thing. That and I've always been a more of a DC fan than a Marvel fan, but I think with the 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 DC um the DC Universe TV shows way back when um uh and then I guess the newer TV shows that when they transferred over to Max
Yeah.
and then all the new stuff that's coming out with the Elseworlds DC movies and TV like the Batman and Penguin. So like all of that. Like we were a huge like the um with the live action Titans and Doom Patrol and um um uh Harley Quinn and the spinoffs and
Harley
stuff.
Quinn
So
has gone way further than I thought it was going to. And even to have a Kite Man show, and I'm like,
yes.
did they seriously pull up a whole season of Kite Man? Okay, sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I've if I can turn my laptop without breaking anything. Maybe nope, no, I can't. Um, too many wires. But hold on, let me see if I can do this. That's my Red Hood
Oh,
helmet
Red
that I've got,
Hood.
and it's autographed by Curran from
All right, from
Titans.
Dave. Oh.
And that's the thing too. Like I thought that Alan Richardson,
Hmm.
and dude, his Hawk storyline in Titans, and I don't mean this is in an ugly way, it was way too good for Titans. Like to put that next to everything else, that Hawk's backstory was fire. And he did so good with that, and which I was excited to see him kind of like blow up since then.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
Because, good for him. But, I hated seeing him go, but that was really good. I also didn't know until a lot later that he runs a whole ministry YouTube channel. Um,
Oh wow.
um, yeah, Alan Richardson has a whole YouTube channel of just devotionals that he does. Um, and somebody in one of my friends named Tristan in Australia pointed out, he's like, you know about his YouTube, right? And I'm like, no. And I'm like, crap, I met this dude at GalaxyCon and I didn't like talk to him about Jesus. He has a whole YouTube channel. Crap. Um, but yeah, he's got, and I can't, I'll look it up when I don't want to like move screens around now, but yeah, he's got a whole YouTube channel of just that. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, but the DC world has gone good. Did you watch The Penguin?
Oh yes. We just yes.
Girl, it was so good.
That oh my gosh. So
Uh,
good.
and like, but like every episode, I have a small group that was watching it too, and every episode, I'm just like, give her all the awards, give her all the awards, because she just killed it. Kristen Milotti, and then
Yeah.
Colin Farrell was impressive out the gate from the movie, so I mean, it's just like
Hmm.
no surprise. But he even took it to another level with this one. But no, it's just like I really hope they clean some serious house just come award season. But one thing that I found funny because like I was when I started watching The Penguin, it just I kept making Sopranos references to it. So during the time since The Penguin premiered, I've rewatched the entirety of The Sopranos,
Oh wow.
and I did not know that Sophia Falcone is in The Sopranos.
Oh.
20 years ago, when she was playing a teenage girl, she's in Sopranos. She's the daughter of a warring mob family. 20 years. So she literally plays an evil mob boss's daughter in The Sopranos. And I'm like, okay, typecast.
Wow. Yeah, all I remember her from is being the mother in How I Met Your Mother.
Oh, is she the mother in How I Met Your Mother?
Yeah, she was in that last season and she's
Okay.
the
I didn't even recognize that, but the one thing I do remember from is the second season of Fargo.
Okay. I
Um,
haven't seen Fandom.
Fargo is kind of dope. It's kind of depressing and kind of hard depending on what season you go into. But each one's an anthology, but they all connect. Um, but she plays a mom with cancer in the first one or in the second season, and but she kind of killed it with that. But it's like the makeup and the everything else was kind of like drowning out what she was doing. But I'm telling you, the yellow dress and the gas mask, I want that Funko Pop. Like that's what I want. That I want that to become a thing, and it's literally had me to the point I want to go out into the depths of my comic book collection and pull out the Dark Victory. Um, because I haven't read Dark Victory in maybe a decade, but Dark Victory is the Long Halloween sequel where Sophia is the Hangman,
Mm.
and I'm like, let me go get some more of this. Just jam it in there. Um, so all nerdy talk aside, we've known each other for about the last decade and some change, and we've crossed a lot of paths in the con world. And one of the organizations that you have always kind of been since I've known you, kind of a flag bearer for is Colors of Fandom. And that's colors with a U in there somewhere, right? Is there
No.
a no? It's just straight colors.
No.
Okay,
No, it's color.
color. Okay,
No S.
okay, no S. In my mind, at some point, I thought there was an OU in there, but it's just color. Okay, cool, 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 cool.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us about what Color Fandom is.
Um, so Colored Fandom, we exist as a group of a community of geeks that started off as just um our two founders were going to meetup.com meetups in the area and didn't have a lot of people who looked like them or they could relate to. So then we evolved to being a safe space, inclusive space for marginalized groups who love every all things geekdom. And we moved on to from just a meetup group where we uh, we also have everything on all the socials, and we also are represented at cons where we host panels on all different things, diversity and all the different fandoms we like. And this year we started doing a partnership with the Durham County Library where we were doing events there also. And during the pandemic, we found out, we couldn't meet online, in person. So we made a Discord channel. So, and which led us to start our own virtual con. We do a two-day virtual con every year through our Discord channel. So that's the gist of Color Fandom.
There's nothing that makes me feel old as much as trying to navigate Discord because I feel like I'm cool. I'm with it. I'm one of the cool kids. And then like I look at Discord and I just see like I'm like I don't know what to do here. And and I'm not even in that many groups, but like I'll like even for this podcast, like they'll send me messages in Discord and I was like I don't know where to find them. There's too many buttons and I see all these people like and I made a Discord, but and I updated it for about a month and I'm like nope. and it's just kind of floating in the ether. So the fact that you're maintaining Discord, and it's honestly a big deal because I know it's a lot of people's comfort zone of where they go
Mm,
to. And
yeah.
and as my 14-year-old points out very often, she's like, I don't go to Facebook. I'm not old. And I'm like, word. Okay, cool. Uh like they have
Yeah, it's
meetups.
funny having different social medias for like my business and for Color Fandom because like you can see the demographic of is what channel or what social media has for different people. Like, I always say our Facebook group is good for creators, or people who like to post articles because a lot of the creators that join our group from all over that we meet at cons and or we know locally, they can post. We're like, feel free to advertise and post and put everything on there you want. So we're like, okay, that's good for Facebook. And then for Instagram, it's like all the everybody who all the young or I guess younger people who join our group that are always on Instagram, but we don't have a social media manager, so most of our Instagram is just for lives and when we're at events and cons. And then for Discord, yeah, everybody who wants to just be online and do everything virtually.
What it's like my friend Billy, who's in the Burlington area, he um has a group that just gets up on Saturday mornings and they all get on Discord audio and play different video games and just talk to each other while they're playing games. Like no co-op or anything, just like this is the time we're gonna play games and chit chat. I'm like, I don't got that kind of organization to be able to pull that off. So what would you say has been some of your biggest highlights from Color of Fandom?
Um, uh, Probably, I guess like our group, being recognized, especially with NC Comic Con. Um, we're known to put on pretty good panels, and it just feels good to be like a go-to, group.
You've been a staple for the Ultimate Comics brand of shows for a minute. Like, yeah, like you said, you really are a go-to for it, and one of those I'd be surprised if you don't have something. So,
And then of recently, as I mentioned before, we got our partnership with Durham County Library, and we've done three panels or events so far with them, and and we're looking forward to a continued partnership with them and being the events being bigger and bigger. um so outside, I mean, we're still in the con geek world, but it's more, we're expanding more to the outside community with doing it at the library.
yeah, because I mean, as many geeks as show up at cons, there's still a lot more that aren't. And, having a good space for them to connect is a big deal. Um, Now, outside of working with Color Fandom, you also have a uh, kitchen. You have a cooking business. Tell us about that. How did that get started?
So Dee's Kitchen is about 15 years old.
Wow.
I started the concept when I was in the 12th grade when I realized I wanted to go to school for baking. It kind of went out from just being a regular chef because I like to cook too, but baking went out. It's I like to create things and then make people happy, and So it's always nice to see somebody, enjoy a sweet. So, um, and then when I got out of school, I got professionally formed Dee's Kitchen, and it was just a regular, just conventional bakery. Where I did a lot of cakes. Um, and then I had treats to sell at like farmers markets and stuff. In uh 2015 maybe, when I went to a program where I became uh plant-based vegan, and so I converted my whole bakery over to vegan, and entered into that world and started to do more festivals. And I still do smaller markets and pop-ups and things like that. Um, and that gave me the opportunity to start doing wholesale at small businesses, like small coffee shops and mom and pop restaurants and things like that. So that's what I do now.
So what led you to become a vegan? And then have you seen like, has it affected your business negatively or positively doing vegan stuff?
Um, uh, I became well. I went to a retreat that was I worked at Whole Foods for the time at the time being, and they had a program where they can send when you apply, they can send people to a plant-based retreat. It was a week-long retreat, and I did it for health at first. And so after the week-long retreat, I was so sold. I started feeling better. I have, allergies and stuff like that. And so, everything, I started feeling better. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Um, and I think because I immediately started like researching and like forming local groups and things like that, with people, with vegans, and gradually able to turn my business over to vegan. So I was already in the space when I completely switched over. So it might have been a little bit easier for me to then just into like jumping into the space. I did lose, like I had some regular customer base, um, that I lost some of that, but then I gained a whole lot more with the vegan community growing, especially like in the triangle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like places or things I go, like, regular, just some markets in different places. But when I have either when my friends, are there and advertising for me, or, people, like I can get customers that don't traditionally eat vegan, but if they try my stuff at a market and they really like it, they come back. I also through this hone into being a allergen friendly bakery, because with being vegan, and then I got a lot of people who have different types of allergies, but they're not exactly vegan. Um, and so, and then I have people in my family that have a lot of allergies. So, in the last few years, I've really tried to advertise myself as, an allergy friendly bakery that everybody can get at least one item from. So that's really, really helped out too.
Has like how was being a small business during the pandemic for you?
It was it was tough, because I was uh I had to pivot twice because I was doing my business and working full time, but I had planned in that January of 2020 to, or I guess December before out to reduce my hours so I could put more into my business so I could eventually go full time. Well, we found out that the facility I worked in was closing, which was before the pandemic happened. And so then I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have to be pushed into full time before before I thought I was ready to. And I planned all this stuff to do and all these plans I had. Then the pandemic happened 3 months later. And so I had to figure out because at that time I did have I think 3 locations that was selling my product. And so like um nobody was open and I had to figure out how how to stay afloat. So then that's when I started doing more like weekend markets and weekday markets and things like that. So yeah, I didn't, and then I didn't get to where I wanted to be um at the time. Like I wanted to be set and everything like that. But yeah, it happened kind of, it's a little rough.
Yeah, that was definitely a curveball in a lot of ways for people, but like especially as a small business, I knew that that had to hit you especially hard. Um, but you're doing well now.
Yeah, I'm doing good. I mean, you know how the food industry gets, when people are buying, they want to buy food, but when people are trying to save, food is especially food items are a little lower on the list. So,
Do you ever set up at cons?
um, no, I don't. Just because uh oh, well, like I guess the bigger cons that I go to or whatever, I don't like have a I just have a stand right now, so I don't have like a truck or anything like that. Plus, I don't make like items that are like specific, like people have like cookies that are um, decorated and things like that. So
I'm just
like I
saying.
would probably set up like as a food vendor at a smaller, kind, but like I don't even
Yeah. That's just usually anything that's not concession food is pretty welcomed at shows after a while. So, um, but I've yet to actually get something from you when you're set up. So that's like on my goal of things is to get something from a booth you're at some point in time. So it's on my list. Um, well, one of the things that kind of prompted us getting for this conversation is one of the things that you were doing for NC Comic Con this year was Amy's TARDIS, and I'll let you tell what you want to say with this, but for the longest I've known you, the longest time you were it wasn't just you, it was you and Amy. And you had one of those friendships that like I literally think when people would see you guys, you're like, that's goals. Like, I wish I had friends like that. And that you guys were always kind of like I felt like it was well, I ran into you in Atlanta at Dragon Con, and it wasn't weird seeing you in Atlanta. It was like just weird seeing you without Amy. I was like, this doesn't surprise me to see you 5 hours away. It's just like, why are you here alone? Um, but for the longest time, it was you and Amy as just like you said, she was kind of a support system for you. She was a good friend, and looking back through my con photos, there's probably a dozen or so photos of the three of us just selfieing or whatever else it shows. And I this past year, it's just this past year, is it Longer?
Yeah, January.
Yeah, gosh, it is just January. Um, you lost Amy. And so if you want to talk about that or go straight in and tell us what Amy's TARDIS is and what that is and just give us the story.
I had to rephrase that. We lost Amy because Amy was she
I
was a
almost said
force.
that then, but I also didn't want to.
The community, um, lost a gem and a light because she touched everybody that um, that she met. I mean, like, I knew how much she meant to me and then us as our local the groups that were in color fandom and also Raleigh Sci-Fi Geeks. But like um when and I knew the things that she was a part of, like the fandom she was a part of when that I wasn't really a part of, but then she was involved in a lot, like in the Doctor Who group. And then as recently when Cobra Kai came, she did a lot of online stuff with them. And but after she passed, and we were advertising her because she has her family here in Raleigh, but then she has her blood family in Florida. So we had to do a lot of things online to celebrate her life. And I like just discovering how many people she touched from like all over, that like her the she was in a Cobra Kai group that when it got posted on Twitter, one of the creators of Cobra Kai responded, um, about, like um, how Amy was and how involved she was, in like the fan groups and things like that. So it's we lost her way, way too soon, but like the lasting effects that she leaves on us, that we decided that we wanted to um uh keep her spirit and her legacy uh alive because of the joy that she gave us to start the Amy's TARDIS, because she is a super, as much as all the fandoms she loves. um Doctor Who and Star Wars and DC and Marvel, that she's a huge Doctor Who fan. So uh and we found she had a commission of her um as one of the doctors. So I was like, okay, this picture is the image that we want everybody to see for Amy's TARDIS. And the foundation is in uh she in 2016 she was diagnosed with epilepsy, but she still, they never slowed her down in anything.
Nope.
um and so we wanted to, in her honor, develop this foundation that supports people with any type of disability, whether it's physical or invisible.
That's a
Um,
good way to phrase that.
uh, to be able to enjoy cons. Um, we for right now, in with our partnership with NC Comic Con, they donated passes for applicants. And now we have, because we're not set up to take monetary donations yet, we're working on that for next year. Right now, we just have a mailing list out for any information that we will get as far as us uh, getting passes to local events, or when we fully expand, where we can, send people to different cons, or and about uh, are able to fund um, things or needs that they should, to make their con experience good. So,
Now, were there folks that got to benefit from it at this past NC Comic Con?
we well, unfortunately, we had uh we were able to, but they had scheduling conflicts, so it
That's
didn't.
life.
Yeah, yeah, and then we didn't get to, just because of, life, and just to advertise as much as we could on both ends. So we weren't able to get, the word out as much as we needed to. But that's why now we're like trying to form this mailing list, so we can have and getting the word out about the mailing list. So, well, we can, send out email blasts for people.
That's still going to be a huge thing, and especially if you can get showrunners to actually partner with you, because I know you've already got good connections with NC Comic Con, but like to be able to have that as something, I think that would be a big benefit for any show. But also to be able to have that much contact is obviously work for your group, and everybody's got their own stuff with it. But I do think, in terms of things that are beneficial, but also really do honor and kind of encapsulate, Amy, I think that's a really, accurate and beautiful way to do it. Um, that's really sweet. Um, Asking you just personally, because, I know you said like everybody lost her. How are you doing? And I asked you this like just briefly over the summer, but like you know, and it's the weirdest, like not the weirdest thing, but it's just like con friendships connect in such weird ways sometimes just because you don't see all the layers that go in between. And like this was not this past summer but the summer before, uh was at Geek Church when Amy got to meet Ashley from Fangirling Over Jesus for the first
Ah,
time.
yes.
And I just like remember like
Yeah, in person,
it,
yes.
just standing there watching that go down. I'm like, man, look at God and look at cons and look at all the unity going on here. I was like, this is just great. And shortly after, like, because when you messaged me about Amy, I was like, I'm gonna call Ashley and tell her. And you know, I I'm a in pastoral ministry, I've had plenty of these phone calls of the something of these natures. I I was foolish in not prepping myself more for that phone call because I had on my mind a reaction or response, and then I'm that was also the first week of my new Muggle job, so I'm sitting in a like legit office, and like I'm just like, let me call her real quick and just let her know, and let's just like just hearing her response at that point in time was just like, oh, you never really are prepared for how much people are impacted and how much people's loss impacts you. Um and I know that just even in that moment, just hearing one other person's thing, but like for you, what's been your process? What have how have you gone through everything?
Well, I would preface to say that um Amy was the third close loss that I had 3 years in a row in January.
Mm,
So I was
I'm sorry.
already in a grieving a state of grief. My sister-in-law passed 3 years ago. One of my other close best friends that I had known for like 18 years passed away 2 years ago in January. And then, so I was already apprehensive about January, and both of those passings were unexpected. Um, so, with, so I was already in grief therapy for a year. Um, and then, and then this unexpected tragedy happened. I was sitting right here when I realized what happened. Um, Getting or figuring out because Amy had just moved in with me a month prior. Uh, and we just wanted to um after her losing her father 6 months prior, uh I just invited her to come, share the house that I have with my other housemate, so we can all, share in everything, life and expenses, and just to start our little community or our go to. We always talked about a golden girls home. um, so Uh, so yeah, when it happened, my uh I guess the core of my other color fandom admins, uh they all came over the next day and helped me through the day because I still had to work. I own my own business, so I don't have like downtime.
Yeah.
I couldn't I was in a state of shock. Um, but they helped me through it. Because I had to I was kind of numb a lot at the time just because I was already in grief. So it was like I was just doing motions and I had to keep everything going, with my business and the group and my family life and things like that. So I am so thankful that I was already in counseling, um, because I was able to talk to my counselor every week about um, Amy's loss. And then the fact that um we shared space, like I always felt that her presence is, is here with me. So um I there are things that come up, like as far as uh things that I know that she would have loved or liked, or new things coming out, or renewal shows or movies, and or things that we had planned for this year, because most of the time, because of the group, we have the year planned out, and everything, we made sure that this year all the cons were in her honor. um and I think all of that, help me through um uh the loss um of of my, I guess, yeah, my best friend for 9 years, I think. We were almost like instant friends when she moved here. Um, Coming from Florida, and she joined her geek groups, and then we met, and it was just like, oh, this,
Did we just become best friends? Yep.
yeah, basically. Um, yeah, so I mean, yeah, like I said, at the beginning, it was, I had very uh numbing and or hard hard days. Um, but it helps that we like the our geek community, that we're able to um like talk about her, and just uh like keep her who she was, just alive in like everything that we do.
There was a right after, I think it was when actually had the memorial service. I was at a show in Kentucky, and the booth next to me was doing a live painting for the whole weekend, and it was a Wonder Bat painting. And I'm just like, I'm just like, I was like, let me know how much that is when you're done. But what, yeah, man, yeah, obviously you're still within the first year of this whole thing, but what do you have any advice or encouragement for people that lose close ones? Because I mean, not that it's something to be callousy, but I think we're all kind of used to losing our older family. We're used to losing older family members and stuff, not people who are, right beside us. And that, so do you have any advice or wisdom on the other side of this to share with people? And if you don't, it's okay.
I mean, um, I think you first of all have to have a support. If you don't have a huge support system, at least like somebody that you can go and talk to, um that that knows you personally, and a professional in any capacity, that you trust. 'Cause like I said before, I don't know how I could have got through these last couple of years without my counselor. And then my group of friends, um, and family, and then uh, and of course I leaned leaned a lot into my faith, um, um, and um, and knowing or feeling like, because like, I believe how people go on, but like I do believe that people have, their spirit is there to help you. And so like I still, uh even though I miss her, I still know I can talk to her. you know and then where I know where she is, and then so I just I think with all of those things, and to like find whatever comforts you, outside of people too. I go to like music and um all my fandom shows or comfort, or some people might have comfort in like comic books or games. So just, make sure you have time to, do that self-care in whatever is your comfort.
So, uh, moving forward for you, what's next for your bubble for your life? Like, you got any big plans? You got any you got any if you're looking at the next season preview, what's next for you?
As in light, yeah, right. Ooh, um, I guess out with it's well, I don't have any big. I mean, it's more of, the same of, I mean, of course we're trying to like, launch Amy's TARDIS into a full um nonprofit um foundation. Um but our friend Robin, she just sent us the Google Calendar for next year. She's like, I have all the cons, everything listed. So like I think we're in constant motion, because like NC Comic Con was like our last con for the year. We were like, okay, but now to plan for next year and all the cons and then the new events and things that we're starting, next year. Um on that scale. And then with my business, just to keep it going. I have my parents are older, so I'm taking care of them a lot. So I'm just, just keeping I'm not making really big strides in my business because of the time that I have, limited time that I have now. But I know this is just for a season, me taking care of my parents in their last stages of life. So, just focus on them and with the help of my brothers, and then just keeping my business going, but growing it as much as I can.
If you could recommend one episode of anything, one specific episode, period, for one person to watch, what would it be?
And I can't do one. Ones are mine. It's like people are like, "Are you favorites?" I'm like, I don't have favorites because I can't like. Yeah, I don't have one. Oh, it's hard for me to choose favorites because I like everything. And I think you can have more than just one.
Oh, you
um,
can. I'm just curious. I just want to see
I
what your
know
answer
it's
would
just
be.
oh man, because that's a hard.
Because like in my mind, I've got like a list of like perfect episodes that stand out for things. And so like for me, Our Mrs. Reynolds, perfect. Like Chuck versus the Push Mix, perfect. Um there's the I'd probably say the I think it's episode 5 of The Penguin, if that's the yellow dress episode.
uh, yeah.
Uh
I will. I guess. I guess I can say um of recent things. Oh well, okay. So one thing, like I said, music for me helps me through a lot of things. And especially musicals. Some days I'll like, especially when I'm baking, I'll just put on a whole bunch of musicals. And so the Once More with Feeling episode in Buffy, it's
but did you
like,
watch Agatha All
well,
Along, by the way?
I did, yes.
Did you see the poster?
Yes, I did.
The Once More with Feeling poster in
I saw that.
okay.
Yes. Agatha, that was also an awesome show. I'm like, we got two good shows that came out at the same time. But yeah. Um, yeah, um that my niece just started watching Buffy, and she's like telling me when I catch up with her, telling me what season she's in now. And I was just telling her, I was like, I go to the Once More with Feeling play Dragon Con every year. I was like, that whole soundtrack has just helped me through a lot. Um But that and the Walking Dead spinoff, The Ones Who Live. Um Episode 4 was written by the one of the stars, Denai Guerrero, which she also plays Okoye in Black Panther. She's a playwright, and she wrote the uh episode 4 in that limited series, and is like one of the best, well written and acted episodes of the whole universe of The Walking Dead. But
Okay. See, there you go. You just
yeah.
stuck the landing on a one episode recommendation. Look at you. And see, like, I don't know that I was ever truly like bought in, but I was like, now I want to see this one episode. Um,
You should watch the whole one. The Ones Who Live, when everybody's talking about the spinoffs, most of the time they're like, oh, the ones, they're okay, okay. But then there's another level for the Rick and Michonne show. Everybody's like, okay, that's almost just like the Walking Dead.
I I feel like I need to finish The Walking Dead before I get there though.
Yeah. I
Because I
mean,
got
I'm gonna tell everybody to finish The Walking Dead.
it's on my list. And just to say this to you too, because it's you appropriate. My favorite Michonne quote from the whole comic book series. Um, I think the fact that, or I think every day we live means we deserve a cupcake. Because like once they get to the end storyline or whatever,
Yeah.
she's a baker.
Oh yeah, yeah, from her. Yeah.
And so she's like, every day we're alive means we deserve a cupcake. And I'm just like, see, there you go. You need to print that panel out and put it in your established vegan venue. Well, uh, Deborah, where would you want people to check out stuff for you, for the color fandom on all the socials for your kitchen? Where should they look for you?
Well, we do have um a link tree
And
for color.
we'll drop that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, the link tree for color fandom, because it got to be a lot to for all of the socials that we have. So it's like easier to put, especially when we started Amy's TARDIS too. So just to put all the links on one thing, and then you can decide which one you want to go to for what you use. And then for Dee's Kitchen, my most of the things I post on Instagram, but then it goes to my Facebook page, but it's all the same tag. And it's I'm trying to forget because it's DK Sweet Eat. So it's like at DK Sweet Eats. Um and then I post everything, where I am, or who sells my product, or and all of it.
Sweet. Well, it was good to talk to you for the like this is the longest conversation we've had in a minute. Um, it's good to talk to you and thank you for sharing your story and thank you for sharing just your heart with things. And I hope it's been encouragement to those who are listening and watching and you as well. And I hope that I'm gonna get to see you sometime soon in the near future.
Yes.
My daughter's in Durham for school, so I'm like trying to like get there back and forth a little bit more now. So um but everybody, thank you for taking time to listen and watch and make sure you check the link or the stuff alongside to be able to see Dee's information. And remember, you can find this and other podcasts over on the Love Thy Nerd Network, Glue on Roku, and find us on YouTube as well. You'll find all of those things there. So thank you for taking time to listen, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
everybody, welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast, which you're finding here on the Love Thy Nerd Network first, where you can find other podcasts across the board, from various on playing video games to life and ministry and culture to the Bible Thump to the pull list. There's a lot going on the Love Thy Nerd Network, so make sure you check those out, and you'll hear this here first, at least a month early before you hear it anywhere else. So thank you for joining in with us today. And today I am joined by a friend, Jenny Wilburn. And I feel like I'm always afraid as soon as I say somebody's name, it's like, did I just say their name wrong? And like I always like have that whole subconscious panic moment.
No, you said it
For
right.
I know like in my mind, I was like, I know I said that right, but dang it, I was like, for that just a second, I was like, I just said their name wrong. Um, I if I'm not mistaken, I've known you for about 14 years now.
Sure, that sounds right.
Um, um,
2009-ish?
yeah,
How long ago was that?
yeah, that's 25 or 15 years now. Uh, and I'll just say this, that our connection is proof that media mail works. I first got in touch with you in the ministry that I met you through because you guys mailed out. Um, Jenny was formerly a part of a ministry called Ground Zero, which is a youth and or children, youth and teen outreach organization in the Myrtle Beach area. Fair description? Yeah.
Sure. I would say teenager,
Just
probably
teenager.
not
Okay,
children.
I
Yeah.
couldn't remember. I was like, I knew you guys did something with school, with
Middle and high school is
middle and
the
high school.
focus there. And I'm no longer there. I left in 2016,
Yeah, I
but
was gonna say like formerly,
check
part of
out
it.
the website to see what they're doing now.
GroundZeroMB.com.
I think
Um,
it's mygroundzero.com.
okay. I don't know. No, I didn't work there. Um, but you guys had mailed out a calendar, like a big wall calendar that had random
Oh,
dates.
yeah. Yeah, that was the youth pastor calendar.
Yeah,
And it was a huge poster.
it was a huge poster.
It was.
It had like free donut day or National Donut Day, National Bubble Wrap Day, stuff like that. And I literally got that my first week as a full-time paid youth pastor.
I love that.
And so I sat down in my little closet of a desk area and opened that thing up, and I was like, and I pulled that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start going to all this. And like
And you
literally
did.
I did the thing, ended up doing like years of missions trips, and
Yeah, because you brought your college students down to help with the building renovations. I remember all of that.
yeah, and would show up for the youth pastor pizza lunches.
Oh,
and
yeah.
and it's like people were like, why are you driving an hour and a half for pizza? And I'm like, I don't know.
Because we were awesome.
Y'all are awesome, and there weren't other people doing anything like that. But I was like, literally every connection I've had from, college students doing ministry there to getting handcuffed by the police at Chapin Park for feeding the homeless, to all the stuff that I've had happen through Ground Zero, and those connections happened because y'all sent out a mailer.
That's
So
crazy. That's crazy. I don't know, 15 years later, does that still work? Probably, because nobody gets mail that's like, things they want anymore. It's all trash.
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I don't even check our mailbox anymore because if it's not a package on my porch, I let my 10-year-old check the mail. Um, but yeah, and I know we're gonna get into a little bit more, but also for just I don't know if I told you this or we've talked about before. Uh, Jay's podcast was the first podcast I ever did.
Oh, really?
Jay had me come out to y'all's house,
I do
and,
remember you coming out for that. Matters
and
of Faith was his podcast name. Yeah.
yeah, and I that was the first podcast I ever recorded.
That's
Um,
awesome.
so I just thought that was neat when I was thinking about
Well,
this.
it's interesting. I know your listeners don't know this yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it. But Jay passed away about a year and a half ago. And so um, I'm trying to figure out kind of what to do with all of his things. He was a writer, he was a podcaster, he did live streaming and things like that. And his podcast is currently not available online. So I'm just throwing this out there because you mentioned the episode. He had put a few of them up on YouTube, like in later months or recent months before he passed away. And I still have all of the episodes.
And so I'm working on, I haven't put it all together yet, but re-releasing all of them so that they're available. Because he did a podcast, it was called Matters of Faith, and he spoke to people of all different faiths. While he was a Christian himself, he felt like there was benefit in hearing everybody's story. And it was a really interesting podcast. I mean, he talked to a lot of people that were Christian. He had a lot of episodes where he spoke himself alone without anyone. And he spoke about his faith and his thoughts on things. And it's been very healing for me to be able to have those and still hear his voice and hear his thoughts on things. So I don't know when you'll be able to find them online again, but if you're interested, they're coming one day. One day, maybe by the end of this year, I'll get it done.
And if you're listening or watching and you're saying, well, why specifically is Jenny here? Um, Jenny is not only a former ministry partner, but Jenny is a parent of teens.
Yep.
And and lovingly saying like geeky teens. And it's one of their graduations today.
Yes, we love Dungeons and Dragons in this house. We love, what else do we love? Oh, video games,
And
uh,
uh and
all of it.
if you guys have listened to the podcast or anything or seen me post about it, Jenny is the one who coordinated the opportunity to do the Legend of Zelda prom.
Oh
Uh
yeah, that's right. Look at
I
all these things I forgot I did.
Yeah, she helped coordinate a Legend of Zelda prom that I DJ'd last year.
Yeah, it
And
was last year.
but aside from that, Jenny's uh yeah, and is there's the terminology of like how do I phrase that? Jenny's husband Jay, who has
Yes,
passed,
yes,
um also was a very prolific horror writer.
he
Um
was. And I didn't read any of it because I don't do horror, but I loved him and supported him.
so outside of like being connected in ministry with Jenny, I've also spent a few events where I was a artist vendor in the same space of Jay when he was doing horror things specifically. And
That's right too. You guys did XCon, I think. Is
yeah, we
that the
did
one that you
XCOM
did in
together.
Myrtle Beach? Yeah.
Yeah. So I was also a vendor with, Jay in those areas. So it was interesting in that space. So Jay was a prolific horror writer amongst the podcasting things and everything else. And but it's been you said a year and a half.
Yeah, it was October of 2022. So we're right
October.
at, I guess it's a year and 7 months tomorrow. Holy cow.
Yeah. Um and so you lost your spouse in that way. So really wanted to talk to you. Not only was like Jay, geeky and the professional of writing and things like that, but your journey of what the loss has been like for you and everything else. But how many books did Jay put out? Do you?
I have no idea. He was a teacher in middle school, and elementary school for I was thinking about this the other day. I think it was 16 years, somewhere between 15 and 20. I think it was 16 though. So he taught for years and always had been interested in writing and kind of dabbled in it, but didn't really put a whole lot out for the public to see. And so it started with him doing short stories and submitting short stories for collections and anthologies. And he ended up getting one of his short stories published in Best Horror of the Year, that was edited by, what's her name? Ellen something. People who are horror writers are probably so mad I don't know her name. They probably yelled out her last name. But it was volume 5, I believe, was the one that he was in. And it's almost like that caused him to go, oh my gosh, I can do this. I can really do this. And so he did a lot of short stories. So there's tons of collections that he's in. And then he's written novels and he's written short stories and he's written stories for children and he's written stories for teenagers, because of his teaching background. One of the reasons that he wrote one of the children's series, which is called Lake Scatterwood, is because our son was a struggling reader and he wanted things that were more exciting than what he could read on his reading level. And so Jay kind of put together that series specifically for our son and
He,
then just kept writing them. So there's
he,
several, I think there's 4 of those, and he was working on more of them. I think there's at least one more story that didn't get published from that, and that's another thing to have to go through when your spouse is a writer, or I guess any creative, there's unfinished work. There's always going to be unfinished work. And he was working, his productivity, even though his health was not great, his productivity was insane. I can't believe what he worked on and what he did, even during a time when his health was not great. But he had two novels in the works on his computer. Like after he had passed away, and I went into his office to kind of figure things out, there were two full novels that he was at least three-fourths of the way through, that were open on his computer. So he would work on one and then work on the other and all that. So, um, your question was, how many does he have? What I know is that he kept a copy of everything he was in because he would get contributor copies of things. And then he has books up on Amazon. So he would get copies of those, or the ones he self-published. I bought a bookshelf that has like closing doors on it to keep
Hmm.
all of those. And the bookshelf is completely full. And it's about a 5 foot tall bookshelf, 3 feet wide,
I remember seeing a picture of
travel
it, and I
shelf.
was like, that's a lot.
It is. It's a lot. It's just a lot.
So like you've been through a lot in the last couple of years. And Jay, it wasn't like just a sudden passing. You had health issues and concerns leading up to that. And now, you also host a podcast kind of dealing with some of that stuff, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But what was the process like for you from like, you know, the health issues beginning to leading up to where you are now? Like, what's that been like for your journey?
Uh, it's been, I don't know, as you say, journey. It's all been a journey.
Yeah.
Jay and I met when I was 18, so I've been with him my whole adult life. I grew up with him. And we knew early on in our marriage that he had a genetic disorder with his kidneys. And he was still healthy at the time, but we were told, prepare yourself. This is coming, and his kidneys will fail at some point. So that brought a lot of darkness to Jay, which I think is why he and horror went well together, because the darkness of horror and finding the light in horror and the darkness, um, just worked with his brain so well and what he was experiencing in life, with a disease that he knew that eventually was going to cause his kidneys to quit working. And again, it's a genetic disease. So he watched his dad and his brother and countless other family members struggle with it. And some of them have passed away, some of them have not. And so he was a little more on the, I always say he was pessimistic. He says he was a realist and that I'm too optimistic. So, um,
I always thought not that you were an odd couple, but like seeing you in ministry capacity and then seeing him in like horror writer capacity, and like, in his like during the time of like, when I was first getting to know him, his like social media persona was a little bit darker. And I'm just like,
oh yeah, yeah.
it's like y'all
He
are.
was. He always was. That's just part of who he was. And I think that God really meant for us to be together because we did balance each other out. Because I know my expectations usually are much higher than they should be, and I expect a lot. And like, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be amazing. And Jay's like, no, wait, hold it down a little bit. And then I would end up disappointed because my expectation of amazing and great didn't happen. Um, but as we grew together, we were married 23 years. It'll be 25 years this year. But unfortunately, he's missed a year and 7 months. but he just always helped me to kind of come back to earth a little bit. So even though I would say he was pessimistic early in our marriage, I think as I got older and I have matured, I realized that he probably was more of a realist than I was. So that was interesting to deal with because I always felt like, don't worry about it. When your kidneys fail, we'll figure it out. And there's going to be, medical science is going to be this different place than it is now when you've watched other family members deal with it. And so I was always very positive about it. And I had mentioned that I left the ministry that I met you through in 2016, and a lot of that had to do with health issues. He had hit a point, he wasn't teaching anymore and hadn't been teaching for probably about 5 years at that point, because he couldn't do a full 8 hours in a classroom anymore. And the exhaustion of his kidneys starting to fail because it's a slow process when you're dealing with a genetic disease. And he needed more, I don't want to say caretaking. He could take care of himself, but there were times I was very concerned about him, because kidney disease and failure in your kidneys brings on a whole host of things that you might need to get to the hospital quickly, and you may not be coherent enough to take care of that. And so I've stayed home with him from 2016 and started working from home until he passed in 2022. But he was able to get a kidney transplant in 2017. And that made such a difference in multiple ways for him. Like, not only was his health better, but he also became more thankful and more grateful. And he would tell you, and I agree, that kidney failure was something he needed to go through in order to become more mature and complete in who he was. Because you can actually see a difference. Like you talk about early on, his social media persona, even though he would be dark and joke still,
Right.
like in 2017, there was kind of this shift that he went from being negative, darker, I guess, to being more encouraging and more um, thankful and grateful for what was going on. And he knows, and I know, that God worked through that situation, even though it wasn't the greatest situation, and it's not anything you wish would happen to you or anyone else that you know or love. But God worked it out in a way that he was able to talk to other people who were struggling with chronic illness, not just kidney disease, but chronic illness in general. And he lived life in a way where he wanted to get as much done as he could with what he had. And he knew, I don't want to, I'm going to say he knew that he didn't have as much time as most people get. I didn't think that. Again, me and my optimism all the time. I'm like, kidney transplant, we got it, we're good. And even though the nurse, when we got the kidney transplant, looked at me and said, this is not a cure, this is a treatment. So there's going to be ongoing treatment for his life. And I thought, yeah, okay, that's fine. You think it's just a treatment. It's a cure for me. Um, and I don't know. That was tough for me because I actually even went through a grieving process after his transplant, even though it was a good time and a positive thing. I had to grieve the fact that my brain thought that he was going to be able to reclaim all those years that we couldn't do things. We couldn't do family vacations. We couldn't uh, do a lot of things that families get to do because of his health and how tired he was and how exhausted he was. And I will say we did get some family vacations in between 2016 and 2022 before COVID hit.
Yeah.
COVID hitting was a whole nother thing because his immune system was shot. Um, but it was nice that we were able to do some family vacation things together and kind of reclaim some time, but not the way I guess my brain had hoped. So that part of the journey was tough. And I think anybody who deals with health issues with their spouse, which you know about too, um, it can really, I guess, shake up what you thought your marriage would be, what you thought your family life would be. It's probably more what your family life would be. Especially with your children and the things that you kind of hoped you would do. Or I guess maybe thought you would do, like when they were babies, you had those mindsets of like, we're going to go to the Grand Canyon and do these. I don't know. Maybe you don't do that. That's what I
Oh,
do.
I do. That's yeah.
all the dreams or the imagination of what you're going to do with your kids and your spouse. So some of that didn't happen. But I don't know. I wouldn't want to have journeyed with anybody else the last 25 years for sure, even though there were a lot of ups and downs with his health. There's nobody else I would have rather have been beside. So,
So with the process of that, um, of actually losing him in that capacity, what was your response? And what was your response personally? What was your response as a parent? What did you do in terms of how that affected you?
oh gosh. Well, his death was a surprise to me. He had started having some complications that we didn't quite understand. The doctors didn't quite understand what was going on with him the last couple of months. And it ultimately ended up being a stroke that he had. So his kidneys functioned beautifully all the way to the end. But he ended up having a stroke due to vascular spasms that can be a complication from people that have polycystic kidney disease because their vascular system is more elastic, is what a doctor explained to me, than the standard vascular system. And so complications can happen for people with that genetic disorder. And we weren't really aware. We were aware that aneurysms were a risk, but the amount of strokes that he had from the veins spasming just damaged his brain so much that it wasn't recoverable for him. And so we did have a time period where he was on a ventilator for about 4 or 5 days for us to kind of figure out how bad the damage actually was and if there was any way to come back from it. And so during that time, it gave me time to talk with my children about, what was going to happen, because I knew, since the doctors had told me that we were going to take him off the ventilator and he wasn't going to make it. So the only thing that I can chalk it up to is that God was with me through the whole thing. Uh, I was able to have conversations with my children each night when I got home from the hospital, and they understood where we were. They understood what was going to happen. Um, they were accepting that it was going to happen. Um, and I don't think it's because I'm a great communicator. I really don't think that's what it was. I do think that it was it was totally a supernatural God thing, that the words I was able to say and the way my kids were able to receive it um, worked and got them on the same page as to where we needed to be as a family to be able to take the next step of what our lives were going to be. Um, there were a lot of questions about things from the kids. I remember my kids at the time were 11 and 17. And I remember my 11-year-old looking at me and saying, "Is it just going to be me and you and his brother, just the three of us?" And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, I guess, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't." And let me say that we do joke a lot in our family, even around death. And so I actually looked at him and said, I don't have any prospects, so I don't think we're going to put somebody else, in." Um, he said, I mean, and it's a valid question when you're 11. You grew up with a mom and a dad in your house, and, dad's not going to be here anymore. Is there somebody else, And I don't know if he meant it that way or if he meant like a grandparent might move in or,
Right,
whatever.
right.
Um, but that we sat there and laughed, because he knew obviously there wouldn't be somebody else, and that's not really what he meant, but it was funny in the moment. So I do the dark sense of humor that Jay had, his boys definitely have as well. So we've had some laughs that some things I don't even want to share because people would think we're sick, but Jay would have appreciated it. And um, yeah,
Honestly,
he
some of
he
my
would enjoy
favorite
it.
jokes or like dark moments with my kids are the ones where you can say that and they'll say, "What is wrong with you?" and that you can't say in public or, for
Or you
whatever.
say there's certain people you just don't say it around, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, we've definitely had those. And I think that the sense of humor for us has been a big part, I think, in the process of being able to carry something so heavy. Because his death left a huge hole in our family, a huge hole in each of our hearts. And even today, my oldest son is graduating from high school today, and oh, I'm gonna try not to get emotional about it, but that's gonna be tough today. I mean, I'm so proud of him, and he has worked so hard. But the last 2 years, which Jay hasn't been here for most of, he has excelled so much in school. He's got 18 college credits that he's graduating with. Like I can't even,
Holy cow.
I can't, I can't even fathom that from my high school years. He's got a 4.1 GPA. He's actually graduating a year early, and we pulled him out to homeschool him in 6th grade, and because he was struggling so much with reading. And Jay said, you know what? If I can get him to be excited about reading and excel in reading, he can learn anything and do well in school. And part of me is super sad that Daniel isn't going to get to experience his dad telling him how proud he is of him. I have said, I'm sad he's not here. And this is one of the things that I don't know if it's helpful to listeners. And every person that's going through grief is very different. But one of the things that I struggle with is when I say things like, I'm sad that Jay won't be here for his graduation. Very well-meaning people will say, "Oh, he knows." I'm like, how do you know he knows? Like, it's hard sometimes, during a death, during a season of loss, during moments like graduation, or big milestone moments for your kids where there are other parents not here. um it's tough to say things out loud and then have people respond to you with something that you don't know for sure, you
That's
know.
that's cookie cutter and even on a spiritual basis, probably bad theology.
Right. Well, like, I don't want to get into theology. What I can say about theology and losing someone super close to you, I can only speak from spousal loss. I did lose my brother 9 years ago, so I can speak from that as well. But I still have my parents. My parents are still here. But you, even though I've never doubted God through any of this. The theology of what I thought things were, and starting to dig back into the scriptures and see what the Bible actually says versus what well-meaning people have said is just, it's wonky.
It's so
Like,
wonky.
that's the best word I can
So
think of to say it. And there's things I don't have the answer to. And I believe, and I'm going to tell you this, I am not a theologian. I did youth ministry for almost 2 decades. Um, and I did it from an administrative standpoint. I did it from being the person that was planning the things. Uh, I We're just not going to know the answers to some stuff some people try to give answers to. We're just not going to know it this side of heaven. We're not.
no.
And it's
That
okay. It's okay not to know. It's
I
okay to not know and still have hope that it's going to be good.
I would rather have a non-answer with hope than a bad answer that I can't trust. And
Right. Right.
and
Like, they're up there fishing with grandpa now. What?
oh, it's so bad. So for me, I deep dived into that. Like I worked in youth with before I was a youth pastor. I also ran Camp Grace in Fairmont. And the first year of our ministry with Camp Grace, full time with the camp opening, there was a tragic accident. Um, the directors, the camp director had a 12-year-old son, and he told the 12-year-old son to drive a truck around and pick up trash. And his 2.5-year-old brother ran out in front of him, and so uh he ran over his own brother. And it was one of those, like, in my entire life, I've not blacked out except that day, um of like being there in that moment, because literally it happened from here to the end of the house, like.
Mm.
And it was a very traumatic day for everyone. And I can still remember like the screams, the everything else, just how everything went down. Um and but I was at that funeral, and one of my least favorite camp speakers ever of ministry period. I'm like,
Is this stuff you want to admit out loud?
oh, I'll admit it. I,
Gosh.
I ain't scared. Um, uh, but like, I just didn't agree like with a lot of what this guy did in general. But like, it was that thing of at the funeral, he said, "Oh, we know he's up there in heaven, just running around, giving Jesus a dickens of a time." And I'm like, that's not right. Like theologically, I was like, that's garbage. And so like at that point, I went and started, pre-internet, like for real internet, started researching what all scripture says about death, about resurrection, about eschatology, all those things. I was like, I just wanted to put it all in one like little neat file. And so like when people have questions, because I'm not gonna walk up and like uh you know, rain on somebody's funeral and be like, "Hey, by the way, that's not accurate." Like, I'm not
Right.
doing I'm not doing that. But guess what? Like when people actually go through stuff, they have genuine questions. And the trite stuff that we say that's not accurate doesn't usually bring a lot of comfort. And so like I'll get people say, "What does the Bible actually teach about this?" And I'll be like, and I'll just slide them the folder like,
You're
"Here's
like,
some
not, honestly, not a lot.
not a lot." I was like, here's some scripture, derive your own understanding of this thing. But I can tell you this, it's not like like you said, fishing with grandpa. I was like, just in terms of like everything else, it's just like this doesn't track. Do I believe they're in God's hands and it's gonna be cool, and that I have hope for all the hope that we're supposed to have? Absolutely. But
Yes.
there is no place where theology is more skewed than in terms of death and heaven. And outside of finances, like there's not there's no other place where theology is more skewed than the funeral life. But
Yeah, luckily I don't know. I was kind of numb the day of Jay's funeral, but luckily I don't think anything that was spoken that day was out of touch. But
yeah,
people, I get it. I've been there where I've needed to say, or I felt like I needed to say something to someone who's experienced loss, and it's hard to come up with what to say. Um, I'm sorry is great, but not really. I mean, if you really don't have anything else to say it, I guess. But what's really nice is someone who's experienced loss, had her two children standing next to her while people are walking up and talking after your children's dad has died. The amount of I'm sorry's that you get is just numbing. Like it doesn't hurt. There's not really any damage done with an I'm sorry, but it just feels numb.
it's not doing any good either.
No, but let me share something that is helpful, I think, at least for me. And we'll talk about our podcast later, but the two other people that are on the podcast with me, we have decided that this is one of the best responses is to walk up to somebody and tell them what you loved about that person. Maybe you're somebody who didn't know that person, so you can't really say anything specific about the person, but maybe you saw the relationship between the two people. Somebody walking up to me and saying, "I saw how well you loved him." That means something. Or gosh, Jay was such a loving father. Or, I mean, don't lie if you don't know anything about them, because if something's untrue, that's going to feel even odder. So don't come up with something that's not true. But just any kind of observation that you saw about the person that passed, or the relationship between the person that's that you're speaking to and the person that passed. Those are the things that give you a little warmth, a little bit of joy in a moment that um, feels so numb and so terrible. Because it's nice to know that something you were doing and the way that you were living your life or the way that they lived their life, that other people saw it in them too, if that makes sense. So,
There's a Andy Mineo lyric in a song called "Death Has Died" that says, "I sat and listened to the priest tell lies to appease loved ones in their seats."
mm,
And it's just like, come on, that's like shenanigans. We know better. But that's amazing to be able to say, this is something I saw in you. This is something I loved about that. That's and realistically, and I'm not saying silence is better, but if you don't have anything to say, your presence is nice. And you don't.
it is. And I'm aware of everybody who came to his service. I'm aware of everybody who sent me a text message, even people who sent me like an emoji heart, you know, it meant something. And I'm thankful for every single one of them. I'm even thankful for all of you that may have spoken words that were a little wonky. Like, I'm still thankful for you. But if you're really looking for a way to reach through the fog and the yuck of loss, uh, think about the idea of sharing something that you've seen in that person, you've seen in their relationship, maybe the fact that you know that it's going to be hard, admitting the hardness of what's happening is good too. Sometimes people try to talk you out of it. They try to talk you out of being sad. Ooh, you want to know something else that I've really struggled with?
Yes.
And still, oh gosh. Okay, so one of the things that I find odd about losing your spouse, because I have moments like today, I'm okay today. There are some days I want to lay in my bed and not get out of bed even a year and a half later. And it might happen 6 years from now. I might still feel that way on a day. But it's not consistent. But sometimes I'll run into people that sort of knew him well. And it's like they put on, you can feel it coming. Like you're walking towards them and you can feel them being like, oh, time to bring it down. We can't be happy. We can't be happy because she's lost Jay. And I think that people need to understand that for me, I can't speak for every widow on the planet or widower on the planet, but for me, I want to talk about Jay. I want you to bring him up. I want to, I just, as I had posted before on Facebook, he was my favorite person. So why would I just all of a sudden not want to talk about him? Like
That's your post about that's why I asked you. Because
so
I wanted to ask you, and then I was like, maybe I was like, there'll be a time. And then you posted, I was like, okay, cool, it's now.
Because it's like this, I don't know. When you have a loss like that, and then you see somebody maybe you haven't seen in a while, and maybe it's been 6 months since their loss, maybe it's been a year, but you can almost feel the womp womp coming when somebody's walking towards you, that it's like, oh, great, now we're going to have to act like we're sad now because this person is walking up to me and they seem sad. So now I'm going to have to not pretend to be sad, but allow sadness to come through to be able to deal with whatever they're dealing with, if that makes sense. And maybe it's because I do have a good bit of empathy in me. So what a person brings to the conversation, I will go to, if that makes sense. Not everybody does that, but I do. Um, so I'm not saying you need to come to me with like celebration, like, woohoo, here I come to talk to you. But there's just something about when I feel like someone feels like they need to be griefy with me, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
And that feels weird. It feels strange. So don't, if you aren't feeling sad about Jay, don't feel like you need to be sad about Jay with me. If that, because I'm sad enough alone.
It's rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Don't
Right.
pour,
But you
pour
don't have to
mourning.
don't bring mourning to me if I'm in a moment where I'm actually not. Like, take a minute to figure out where I am before we decide to be in a mourning moment. Because there are days that and I'll be honest with you about where I am. I don't always post about it. And this is something we talked about too on the, actually, we haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, but it might be coming. Um, One of the things that's interesting is trying to, everybody comes out of the woodwork right after a death. So you have, oh, here's all the food, and you have so much food you have to throw it away because there's too much. And then you have people who are like, let me help you with the kids, let me do this, let me do that. And it's like for about a month, maybe. And then all of a sudden you're alone.
Yep.
You're alone. And everybody, and I know everybody else has to move on with their lives, and that's fine. And I have to learn to deal with mine without my person. And that's fine too. But shoot, I wish, the meal trains that everybody sets up. I almost wish that Meal Train had this thing where it was like a 6 month check in. Like, let's check in at 6 months and see if they still need meals. Because I'm telling you, I didn't want to cook. I still don't really want to cook. I just, I just don't. And I have days where I get really excited and I could do it. And I feel good about doing it. And I'll just be like, yay, I'm going to cook and we're going to cook or whatever. But shoot, man, at about 6 months and about a year, um, it was like a running into a brick wall all over again. And the hard part is you don't really want to reach out to people and go, I need help, because you can look and see other people are struggling in their lives too to get stuff together. And it feels weird to say, gosh, if somebody would bring us dinner, this week would feel so much easier, But it was like all your dinners came 6 months ago or a year ago, all in the same week, you know?
Or the same
Uh,
day.
right. And, gift cards for meals are great, but you still have to go get them, at least where we live. We don't have delivery anywhere. Some of you are lucky and have delivery, but anyway, that's one of the things that is interesting. And so I don't put out there all the time that we're struggling. This year between Christmas and about February, those 2 months were so hard. I think those might have been the hardest 2 months I've had so far. But I didn't really talk much about it because when you're in it, you don't know how to talk about it. You don't know how to vocalize it. And then you also feel like you've reached out to people before, like you're safe people that you reach out to. You don't want to overdo it with them, if that makes sense. Um, and so you tend not to. And, I guess just check on your people. I have a few people that do that. And unfortunately, the ones that tend to do it the most are the ones that don't even live anywhere near here. So, them coming and taking the kids to go do something fun. So they're not sitting in the house because I can't get out of the house and go do anything. Or people that would bring a meal or whatever. They're just not, here geographically close.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's hard because I think sometimes we put out there that things are going well, that we are thriving, but some days we're not. Some days we're not thriving. And so since some of the things that we put out for social media look like, oh, everything's going great, but then we don't post for 2 months. If we
Right.
disappear for 2 months and the last thing we posted was we're doing great, chances are we're not doing great right now.
Well, I mean,
So,
and I was gonna ask about this too, because like not immediately or well, after, like, not that there's a perfect time, but you took a good chunk of time after Jay's passing to invest in the boys and to go do stuff.
right.
To
Well, we
be
had a Disney trip planned with Jay
mm,
that was supposed to happen a month and a half after he died, and I almost canceled it because I thought, you always hear like, yeah, we won the Super Bowl and we're going to Disney World. Nobody's like, hey, my husband just died and we're going to Disney World. Like nobody says that. So it felt weird to still go. But I had a friend of mine who said, no, you need to go. The boys need it. The boys need it, and you guys need to go. You had planned to go. You made this plan. Like we had made the plan like 2 years before. We were supposed to have gone the year before, but with COVID, we canceled it and pushed it off because Jay wasn't comfortable yet with going and being with other people. And so we ended up going, and it was a long trip because Jay always wanted to pace himself. And we had saved all the money to go and we had already paid for it. And so we did that. And it was hard, but it was cathartic. It was good in a lot of ways, but still hard. Um, that was the trip that I decided. And again, this was in December. He died in October, so it was only 2 months after he had passed away. But I decided to quit wearing my wedding rings on that trip because people on the Disney buses kept asking me about my husband. And I didn't think, well, we're on a Disney trip and I'm going to tell them he's deceased. That just doesn't seem like the conversation you have with, bippity boppity boo playing on the bus with you. So I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to take them off and hopefully we can avoid these conversations about my husband with strangers in the supposed happiest place on earth. So, and I've never put him back on. And again, that's a personal thing for people to choose and decide. But I don't know. You were asking though about other things that I did with the boys, staying active with them too. So
Did you find that was helpful? Like just doing stuff with them? Like, do you feel like it was like reflecting on that? Like, what was the most like? How was that for you, and what was helpful?
I'm going to say during the season that it was necessary. Um, because I had to do something during that season. I couldn't just sit still. So I do remember we went kayaking, we went mountain biking, we did all sorts of things together, even in addition to the Disney trip. And we stayed active, and we have a family that's close to us that we love dearly. That they're very active outdoorsy folks, and so we did a lot of things with them, and that was helpful. But looking back on it, I can see that it was a season of trying to stay busy and not really deal with the grief.
Mm.
But that first year, you're just numb anyway. Everything feels numb, everything feels off, everything feels weird. Um, One thing that was a little different for me than maybe most people have is that Jay's health had been an issue for a few years for us, and especially with COVID and him trying to stay away from germs with his lowered immune system. The boys and I had done a lot of stuff without him. So for me, being out of the house without Jay with the kids kind of made it feel like Jay might still be at the house, if that makes sense. um, so every time we would come back home, it was like being slapped in the face again that he wasn't here.
Mhm.
And so I liked staying out of the house more than I liked being in the house because our family did a lot of stuff together in the house. We play a lot of board games. We read a lot. We do a lot of things together. We watch movies and uh, binge watch TV shows and things like that together. And him not being here because he kind of was a main part of all of that inside our home, being away from the house felt easier, if that tracks. Yes, it does. It tracks.
It tracks.
So, but I started realizing that every time I would leave and we would go on a trip, I'd have a good time on the trip and I'd come home and this depression would hit me. And it was, I kind of refer to it as the pit. Like I would fall into a pit for a few days and have to get out of it. And uh, some of that was because I wasn't dealing with the grief. I wasn't facing it when I was away from the house. And so when I'd come back home, I'd have to face it, and I didn't want to. So it was a struggle for sure. But I am a big supporter of therapy. So I was seeing a therapist, and she helped me work through a lot of things that I wasn't working through on my own, and that was super helpful. And I've found now, even this past February, I was able to go on a trip to Europe, and it was the first trip that I ended up going on. The kids stayed here; their grandmother came and stayed with them, and it was the first trip that I went on. And when I came back, I didn't feel like I wanted to crawl in a hole. Yeah, I still miss Jay. But I didn't have this days and days of depression after coming back to the house. So uh, I think that's because of all the work that was done to deal with the grief that I may have been avoiding earlier in the grieving process. Because you have to face it. You have to, or it's not going to start to relieve on any level. I really didn't like when people would say it gets better because in my brain, how could anything be better if Jay's not here? But, mm, and get better at dealing with it versus the situation necessarily getting better.
Yeah.
And I think that I am maturing and I am finding out who I am. Because, like I had said earlier, I met Jay when I was 18, and my whole existence as an adult was with him. And we were a good team. He helped me when I didn't have much of a backbone in situations. He would tell me what to not he would tell me what to do. That makes him sound like he was controlling. He was not controlling at all. Um, but he was my sounding board. Um he was my backbone. He would be like, you don't need to put up with this. You need to tell this person that this is over. You're not dealing with that anymore, when I would never tell those things to myself. Um, but the interesting thing is that being with someone in that capacity in a marriage and a relationship, that even though he's not here, so much of who I am is who he was. And I can still hear his voice in my head when decisions come up that need to be made. And I can confidently say, yeah, Jay would approve of this choice in this situation. Or I can confidently say, Jay could care less which one of these I picked, because we often had that conversation too. He's like, you know what? You can pick A or B. It's your choice. It's your choice. You get to choose that thing. I've got no reason to tell you to pick one over the other. But it's neat to be able to actually still see that no matter how long I live on this earth without him, that he's still part of who I am. He's still part of what makes me me as I'm still discovering who I am by myself.
Mhm. So now you're doing a podcast that's helping you and other people in this
Yes.
process. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I have my sister-in-law who lost her husband, my brother, 9 years ago this year. And then I lost Jay a year and a half ago. And my friend Sarah lost her husband 3 weeks after we lost Jay. And so the three of us had been talking and just kind of leaning on each other. And of course, Sarah and I would always ask Terry, who lost her husband years ago, like, should it feel like this? What can we expect from this? So we kept kind of talking to her to find out these things. And we started talking about the idea that if all three of us have to walk this road without our spouses, that maybe our story and our journey is something that can benefit other people. So we decided to start a podcast. We aren't great at it. It's a little baby podcast. We're just getting started. So we started in January and it's called Go Get a Snack. And we have debated changing the title because how many people know Go Get a Snack has anything to do with widowhood? Probably none. But the reason we named it that is one, we are obsessed with snacks and finding the best snacks. And Sarah is particularly picky about what you do and don't do with certain snacks, including popcorn. Um, and it's always just been a funny joke between us. But as parents, we also have learned that when our kids get really grouchy and get really emotional if we say, you know what, time out, we just need to go get a snack. So that's kind of where the idea came from for us, is that when things get overwhelming in our lives, we just mentally tell ourselves, maybe we need to go get a snack. And it's biblical too, you know?
I was about to say that's, when I knew what the podcast was about, I was like, okay, this is the prophet taking a nap and getting a
That's
snack.
right.
Got it.
You
Okay.
just need a nap and a snack when things get overwhelming. So we've decided that we don't care if people totally understand that that's what the podcast is about from the title. We're hoping maybe we can educate people on it. But then we don't know that it matters. You could just choose to listen to us or not. But our hope is that we can be people that can talk about spousal loss, um, and widowhood, which we hate the word widow. And we have tried to come up with another word, but things like dowager, that doesn't, that's not a great word either.
It makes me think of Downton Abbey, but past that,
Yes, it does. um, so anyway, we can't come up with a better word for it. So we're just going to call ourselves widows, even though we don't like it. Um, we did look it up online one time for synonyms, and one of them said dead man's wife. It's like,
yikes.
it's not untrue, but anyway, so we hope that our podcast would be something for people who have lost a spouse, but we also hope it'll be something for people who want to walk with people who have lost a spouse. And Sarah, one of the last episodes we did recently, Sarah actually made the comment, if you haven't lost your spouse or you don't know anyone who has lost their spouse, just wait. So I said, wow, that is really strong there, Sarah. And she goes, but it's not untrue. It's not untrue. All of us, if you don't know someone now, someday you will, because none of us make it out alive, right, from this earth.
There's
Go.
the HBO series Watchmen, like the sequel series to the Watchmen story. And there's a line in there that's like always stuck with me since I watched it. It's the Dr. Manhattan says, by definition, don't all relationships end in tragedy.
Mm,
It's
so true.
like regardless of how it ends, they all end in tragedy. And it's just
They
like
do. They
okay,
do.
yeah, yeah,
Well, and I was going to share this earlier, but I'll share it now. But one of the scriptures that really irked me right after Jay died was when Jesus was talking to the religious leaders who were like, so who are we going to be married to when we get to heaven? And, of course, they're asking about multiple wives, so what they're asking really isn't, something Jesus is going to waste his time on answering really
right,
anyway.
yeah,
But his wording, depending on which translation you look at, basically says, all of you down here are so concerned about marriage, and it's just not a big deal up there, or not up there, but in heaven.
yeah.
And I got so angry because I thought, holy cow, I have worked so hard on my marriage. Jay and I worked so hard, and it doesn't even matter. But I've kind of gotten over being angry about that because I now realize that's not totally the point of what was being talked about. But
Right.
still,
Well, there's one of my best friends, like they were doing a Francis Chan Bible study on marriage, and like that's like the second chapter is like your marriage doesn't matter eternity or something to that effect.
do you
Uh
know that the first book I read after Jay died was that book?
oh, shut
Why
up.
would I read a marriage book after Jay
Oh,
died?
oh
I
my
just
gosh.
decided I needed to know more about what I didn't know while I was married. The grief brain is weird. That's all I'm going to say.
Uh,
I absolutely refused to read anything about grief because I've never been diagnosed with a defiant disorder, but I do believe there's this defiance in me that if somebody says, oh, here's everything you need to know about this thing, I'm like, you don't know nothing. I
you,
don't want to know
you
what you
can't
think
tell
I
me
need to
what I
know.
need. Yeah.
Right. So, so now we're having a podcast where we're talking about what you need to know. And I would probably not listen to it either.
I I don't think most podcasters would listen to their own podcasts.
I do because I edit ours. So
But like my friend that was like, they were in their first 10 years of marriage and read that book. They're like, and the wife was literally like, if I'm not married to you in heaven, I'm not doing this. It's like, this isn't worth it. It's not eternal. She's like, ugh. And like,
Well,
so
you know what I do love about that book? And I think this was something that, because the first chapter talks about the idea of being married and the idea of preparing for eternity together. And that's so beautiful because
yeah,
really that's that's what marriage is. I mean, it's really about the two of you preparing for eternity together. And I think totally differently about all my relationships that way. I think about my parenting relationship differently after reading that chapter. And even though I didn't get a chance to read it while Jay was here, um, I think we did that. Not because someone told us to, but because that's what we believed marriage was about. It was about holding each other's hands and walking through all the stuff, knowing that there's an eternity on the other side of it. And even though I would still love to be walking with him and holding his hand here, uh, I I know that we did what we were supposed to do together in preparing for eternity. So I hope that all of my relationships here still carry that and echo that in some way, whether it be friendships or my parenting relationship with my kids and um, just pointing to Jesus through all of it. And we struggle with some things on our podcast faith wise. Sometimes we actually even tried to record a podcast about faith or faith after our loss, and we kind of gave up. We recorded a whole 45 minutes and we're like, none of that's usable. It's such a mess because trying to process your faith out loud after you've experienced a loss like that, it's you don't want people to get the wrong opinion of what you think about God, because I still trust God even when I can say out loud I struggle with understanding all the things. Um, but you talk about it for 45 minutes with your two friends that have also lost their spouse, and it can get a little jumbled.
yeah, it can get saucy in there.
So, yeah. So one day we might approach that again, but it may be a little too early for us to do that.
So if people want to check out your podcast, where would they go?
It is on Spotify. Go get a snack. And you can also find it on Apple Podcasts. I think those are the two places that it is. I don't know if Spotify pops it out to other places other than that, but I know those are the two places that it is currently. And we're talking about putting it on YouTube because we hear that's a thing we're supposed to do. We're
It
learning as we go.
it is. And it may not be your biggest audience at first, but it's one of those places that has like endurance of like people finding stuff later.
Right,
So
right. So that's where we are, and we're learning. We actually started in January and had to take a hiatus because I went out of town. Sarah had to have surgery. We had just several things happen over 2 or 3 months. And so we're back now. And we have some really cool plans for the summer. I'm actually really excited about our plans for the summer. We're going to focus on self-care. We're calling it self-care summer. And so we're going to talk about different aspects of taking care of yourself. Each episode. We haven't hashed it out completely yet, but we're getting together at the end of this month to figure all that out. So I we're hoping to share. You know how there's some of you did one of these a long time ago. Do you remember like here's a list of 5 things you do every day to be healthier or whatever?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
drink a gallon of water, run 400 miles, or whatever the things are that you do. Read 47 pages out of a book every other day or whatever.
yeah.
I don't know what they are. So we've decided that we're going to put together a list of 7 things that are simple to do, but when you're in depression, you're in struggle, that they're not, they're hard to do, but they're simple things. And so when you find yourself in this depressive state or in this not such a good state mentally, that if you can just get up and say, okay, today I'm going to do this one thing, that it can help. And then the next day you could be like, okay, so I did that one thing. Today I can do that one thing again. Okay, maybe I could do the second thing with the first thing this day. So just the idea of kind of building on being able to get out of one of those episodes of being in a pit, I guess. And again, we're still developing it, and maybe I shouldn't have said anything yet
Hey,
because
no,
we're not there.
it's a
Um,
good start talk.
so, but that's what you can expect from us this summer. And even though we do focus on loss, I do think self-care is super important, and it's not selfish. It's really not. I used to think it was, and as being a caregiver, it's tough to take care of someone and yourself. But it's really important because if we don't take care of what God gave us, then we aren't going to be here to do the other things. So I personally want my body to last as long as it possibly can here to do all the things God's called me to do. So taking care of myself is pretty important.
Yeah. Well, Jenny, thank you for taking time on a day where you also have other million important things going on.
Just one big one. He's graduating, and I need to leave in 15 minutes to take
Yep.
him.
Um, so is there, before we go, anything else you want to leave people with? You don't have to, just like want to make sure I'm giving you any.
I don't know. Take care of yourself and love everybody around you.
Sounds great. um, Everybody, thank you for taking time to listen. Make sure you check out Jenny's podcast on Apple or Spotify. Go get a snack. And we're excited to be part of the Love Thy Nerd Network and what's going on there with these things. Also to announce that Love Thy Nerd content is now featured on the Glue network on your TV. So if you have a Roku or any device like that that can stream it, the GLU network focuses on the intersection of faith and pop culture and things of that nature and encouraging material. And you'll be able to find this podcast there along with a lot of other Love Thy Nerd contents. And this will also, you'll be able to find it a little bit later on Faith and Fandom as well. So, Jenny, thank you for taking the time to hang out with us today and share your story.
It was my pleasure.
And I hope you have a great graduation. Tell the boys I said hey. And,
I'll do it.
All right. Hey, everybody, have a great day. Hey everybody, welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast, part of the Love Thy Nerd podcast network, where you can find lots of nerdy faith, promoting faith adjacent and all overall Jesus-y podcast over on that network. Lots of cool stuff there. And you can also find us on the Glue network on Roku. I'll mention that at the end as well. But thanks for joining in. Today I am joined by Nathan Webb of Checkpoint Church. Hi, dude. How you been?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here.
You and I first podcasted it 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that point in time, you in that conversation was the first time I'd ever heard like someone actually verbally speak of digital church in that context. Like you were the pioneer of that, at least for my bubble. So tell, like, for the people that don't know who you are and everything, tell what Checkpoint is, what you do, what that life is like.
Sure. So I'm out of the mainline tradition. I'm a United Methodist elder. And so at the time that we met back in 2021, I would have been going through the process that we call provisional orders, where I was pursuing becoming an elder, but I wasn't yet in full connection. And I grew up a major nerd, and my dad is a pastor. And I was one of those pastor kids that actually really liked church. And so I had this really positive experience with church, but I never really felt like I was able to be my nerdy self. And so then whenever I experienced a call to ministry, I started to really wrestle with what does it mean that I didn't feel welcomed as a nerd? Maybe it was just my one-off experience. But then whenever I went to undergrad, I discovered that that wasn't the case, and that in fact, nerds just weren't really welcome in the church, maybe as a fallout from the Satanic Panic, or maybe it was just kind of a bias that they would be well suited to the sound booth, and that was about it. But then at some point I realized, hey, maybe there could be something here. And so in 2020, I finished up seminary and just wanted to get like a bug in the ear of our church developers in the conference and just kind of let them know who I was and a vision that I had for the future. I thought maybe I'll plant a church in 5 to 10 years. But lo and behold, the church developer in the conference was a major nerd and had played D&D with his college buddies for 20 years after college and like just loved it, absolutely enjoyed every minute of it and got what I was trying to do. That conversation happened in February of 2020. And then March of 2020 happened. So we pretty quickly had to pivot. Yeah. So originally the pitch was not for a digital church. We wanted to do something very similar to what Love Thy Nerd does at cons. We wanted to kind of go serve at cons and be present in those spaces and just get to know them. And of course, I thought I was the first one that had ever thought of this before discovering how many others had done it.
Everybody thinks they're the first one.
Yeah. But I got into it and wanted that, and then March happened and we had to pivot and revision. And so the question that I asked was, where are the nerds if they're not at con? And the answer was they're on Twitch. So we started streaming on Twitch and wanted to meet people there and still didn't have the vision for the digital church. We kind of just wanted to gather people online, but still kind of envisioned like, what about a game shop? That, you know, the front is a game store and that sustains the ministry. The back is a church and that enlivens the people. Still, we were stubborn, and then we just discovered we had a thing on Twitch that was happening, and people were forming, and a community was forming. And so they taught me about Discord. I had never heard of Discord, and I discovered that it was the coolest thing I could have possibly dreamed of. And the more and more that I've gotten into it, the more and more convinced I am that it is not just a satisfactory form of church, but is a true exemplary form of church. And so we have a digital church building on Discord that we call Checkpoint Church. And that is where we gather 24/7 in what I like to kind of don a neo-monastic expression of church. We are doing what the monks did. We really are gathered 24/7 on Discord. But we're just online instead of in the monastery. But it's an interesting and fascinating thing that we've built over the course of these past 4 years, and wanted to discover how to do discipleship through there. And that led us to YouTube, and the folks wanted to learn how to serve. And that led us to a thing that we call level 2, which is just a level of service within our community. And we needed moderators. So we created the Guardians, and the next thing we decide we need, we're going to create as well. We're very adaptable and a scrappy bunch continuing to learn what does it mean to be church that is happening digitally.
So I know, like, I've seen you post different number stuff, and I know everything's not numbers based and everything. I've seen you post different number stuff and had conversations with you over the times. How many like leaders / elders, deacons, whatever you would like make the label as, how many people are like beside you serving with you to make this happen?
Oof, it's such a tough question. So as far as staff, like paid people, it's just me.
Yeah, and I knew that part.
I'm appointed to the thing, and we have not figured out sustainability enough to the point where we're able to hire somebody. But and I've mentioned this to the powers that be within the UMC. We're past the point of needing another pastor. Like we are to the point that if a church was the size that we are in a physical brick and mortar traditional style, then it would be baffling that they have one pastor and no administrator and no fill in the blank, because we are far beyond the numbers of the point that we need that. Purely based off of leaders. So I mentioned we have this thing called level 2. And all of that requires is that people let me know that they want to serve the space. So whether that means they're leaders in the space is kind of up to them, how they take that service. But the people that have opted in to say, I want to help like serve this community and be a part of this community on more than just a consumer side, we're in the numbers of like the low 30s. And that's where we've gotten. So some of those are so involved that they are there every single day. They're my, right-hand man. They're my people that are right there helping me do what needs to get done and serve in the space regularly and moderate the space regularly. And then there are others that are a part of it because they just want to know more. And then they're curious about how they can serve and respond to some posts on Discord. So it runs the full gamut. And I don't really have a full number of like who does what necessarily, but that's about where we're at. And so that's per person, right? Our Discord is a little over 600 at this point. So that is a bafflingly small number to a huge community that needs more people there that are just there to serve it. And a lot of that is because of a recent boom that we had. And so that recent boom in numbers has kind of led to us not scrambling, but to us really being insistent about like, hey, if you feel led to serve this community, like we need you. Like it's time. If you've at all felt like you are in this space to be more than just a consumer of the space, then it is the moment. And we could really use all the help we can get in making sure that we're adequately serving and loving the nerds, geeks, and gamers in the space.
Based on the people that you do have currently serving, what do you feel like would be your max capacity of people you could effectively minister to?
Ooh, now that's an interesting question. And it would be like, what does ministry even mean at that point?
Right.
Like the pastoral ministry, then the rule of thumb, I can't remember what, is it like Dunbar's number or something? There's some number out there that is like a pastor should serve like at most 150 people.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's like the capacity for a pastor. And so as soon as you get over 150 people that are there to be pastored, you need another pastor to handle to share the load. And so I don't know. I feel like personally, I'm at capacity. I'm doing the best that I can to all the new people that we get, try and engage them in a serious and intentional way. But between all the other things that are happening, it's tough, and I'm stretched pretty thin, and I have to be pretty rigid with my boundaries. And I'm thankful my wife is very good at boundaries, and being a PK, I'm very good at boundaries because I saw what it did to my dad. But that doesn't make it necessarily the easiest thing in the world. I have to do it for my own mental health and for my familial health. The reason I say it's tricky is because of the internet and because of what I just experienced with this video. So I mentioned the boom, and I'll try not to talk about it too much because I feel like it's all that I've talked about. It got to the point where I apologized on Facebook because I was like, I'm posting about this every day, and I'm so sorry. Like, I feel like y'all are getting annoyed at how much, and nobody was telling me I was being annoying, but I was like, if I saw somebody who only talked about one thing, I would probably be irritated. So I maybe read a little bit too much into my own biases, but we had a video that popped off to the point of making us YouTube partners pretty much overnight. And we reached, I think we're at 180,000 views on that video, which for comparison's sake, our highest viewed video before this one was at 6,000 views. So that we went from 6,000 views being our absolute cap of all caps to now 180,000 plus views. It's insane, the growth that we've experienced. But what really has struck me and has caused me to kind of question the power of the internet to do ministry is the comment section. If you go through and scroll through the comments of this video, we have nearly 1,300 comments on this one alone. And just for context, it's on the television show Has Been Hotel from Amazon, which is a really risque theme. It is a challenging story. It is not something that is comfortable for Christians. And so a lot of Christians lashed out against it on YouTube. And so what happened was I presented a really just equitable viewing of it. I don't think I praised its, glories or anything, but I just tried to approach it in a fair manner and was like, hey, maybe we're overreacting a little bit, church. Let's try and just enjoy this media for what it is. And whenever I did that, it just struck people as like, finally, a pastor is seeing me for me. Finally, a pastor is meeting me where I'm at. I read comments that said, I would have never left the church if this had been the church that I was a part of. If somebody had treated me this way, then I can't tell you how much it would have meant to me back in those days before the church hurt me. And so there was so much visceral church hurt and kind of an ex-church experience that was so soothed by this random video that I really didn't even talk about it that much in there. There were just people that were comforted in a way that somebody was willing to hear them and be there for them in the media that they love and that they enjoy. And that has been a real game changer. Like if you had asked me before this video, I probably would have said just 150 people. It's how many I can serve as a pastor. And I think that's true. But Checkpoint Church has a unique capacity, being an internet-based church, to reach a dramatically larger audience of people who really need to hear our message that they matter to God, and that we believe that nerds, geeks, and gamers truly do matter and are worthy of God's love and are worthy of being told that.
One of the things that one of the things I've tried to really kind of keep reminding myself and grasp being in this nerd ministry space is um we're called to different congregations and different people for different purposes. um like never been on Twitch like at all, and I know you like live there, and
Not like
and,
Jate. No, not like Jate live. I bow to Sensei there with the ones that are
yeah.
streaming, 10 to 12 hours a day. I humbly concede that one.
And that's the thing, even with talking with Jate before, I was just like, foreign concept, no idea. I was like, and even like with your response to Discord, I still feel like an elderly man trying to find my notifications, because like even I've mentioned something about Discord before it got started, and I'm literally like, where do I go? Um, but one thing that's like, I was happy for you when your has been video popped off, because you're in a different space than I am in some capacities. Funny thing, I had a has been video experience that was like 1,000% the other direction, but I'm also not mad at it, because we reach different people.
Right.
I do a little Friday morning, hey, here's some news from this week thing, just while I'm drinking my coffee before I leave on Friday mornings, and I do like a little Facebook Live video for that. And it was the week Has Been Hotel was dropping, and I said, "Oh, hey, by the way, Has Been Hotel is going to drop on Amazon next week." And I got, just for announcing that it was existing, I got a loving reprimand from somebody. And here's the thing: I know the person 1,000% meant well, and I was like, "Okay, I appreciate your perspective with that. Noted." But it's just like, I mentioned it once and like was like, whoa. And I was like, look at how different people respond in these capacities.
Sure.
And with that, and one of the things too that I saw the most, I went to a Comic-Con in Lexington, Kentucky, and it was almost a completely unofficial Has Been Hotel con.
Oh, how about that? That sounds overwhelming.
Well,
we have a lot of them in our Discord, I'm sure.
So the bottom floor, the con was 3 floors. Bottom floor was celebrities, your big ticket people. The middle floor was panelists and all your panel rooms. The second floor, or the top floor, was just Artist Alley, vendors, and the entire cast of Has Been Hotel.
Oh, wow.
Like, I'm talking giant wall displays, like the front of the hotel, like everything. And like the entire cast was all there. And so the majority of the cosplayers were all Has Been Hotel. And the whole time I was sitting there, I was like, they'd enjoy his video. And I recommended it a handful of times at the show, to the people that talked with it. But and that's just one of those things that people, like, if they have the apprehension that they're going to be prejudged before they get the chance, and I think that's the good thing about like what your video did, and like what so many of these ministries that are out there are doing, is like kind of taking away the prejudging to say, hey, I'm willing to meet you where you are. And there's a dude in my community who I know he reads every post I post. I know that he's like follows everything I do. Not a supporter, but he follows. And I went to an open mic night at a coffee shop recently and just did a poem about collecting vinyl. And he's like, "You went up there and you didn't talk about Jesus." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, I just wanted to be a part of the art space." He's like, "Cool. I've had more conversations with that guy since then than the like decade prior."
Oh yeah.
And I really appreciate the fact you're meeting people the way you are, where you are.
Sure.
What would you feel like is if that's one of your biggest pop-offs, which, by the way, you mentioned it, and I haven't honestly paid attention in real life terms lately. How far do you have to go to be a YouTube partner for those listening?
So there's a couple requirements out there, and the big one was 4,000 watch time hours. And so we were like, we'll never get there. We've been on YouTube for 4 years, and you got to have 4,000 within the span of 12 months. And so the highest we ever got, even when we were making the most content and getting the most views, was somewhere under the 2,000 marks. We were barely halfway. So once you reach 1,000 subscribers, and then you have to get so many watch time hours, and then you have to apply. And so we, like I said, it was overnight. That video went from, bringing us up 2,000 hours to 4,000 hours to 8,000 hours to hundreds of hours, more than that at this point. We just keep growing and growing, and it keeps being seen by more and more people. And so that's the real requirement, is like, not only can you get enough views and subscribers, but can you get people to actually watch? Because if you just get views and it's only 3 seconds, nobody cares.
Right.
That's the issue with shorts. And that's why shorts have kind of reframed YouTube in a way, which if we were to base off of shorts or any of our other videos other than this one, we still wouldn't even be close. It really is. It was an overnight success situation with this one.
I'm not mad at it, because it was a job, and when you take a job, you know what you're getting into. My most successful content of my life probably is stuff that will never benefit me past the paycheck I got. I was a screenwriter for a short window, 2 years, for Clever Movies, Screen Junkies, Fandom Entertainment. They've kind of like all absorbed each other at different points. I have like 12 videos with over 3 million views each. But my name's nowhere attached to it.
Right.
It's like,
yeah, it
nice.
Is a thing. And it's almost like when it happens to you, it's this stunning, like, shock and awe that lasts for like a week, and your stomach just kind of doesn't settle for like a week. Yeah. And then as soon as it's over, you realize that like the dust settles and absolutely nothing about your life has changed. Granted, I think that with this one in particular, like, our Discord has grown, and so things are kind of irrevocably changed for Checkpoint. But for me, like, it hasn't really changed my life at all. We had a video back in our very first year on TikTok that went viral. And it was me learning that you could use the move cut in the overworld in Pokemon, and I freak out, and people loved it. And so we got 1 million views on that. And it was, so unimportant, so incredibly unimportant. But it was, while it was happening, it was the most exciting thing in my life. And so there's like a weird nature of this internet virality. And I have to so regularly humble myself and just kind of remind myself, hey, I am not a streamer. I am not a content creator. I am the pastor of this church that makes content and streams. Like, it's an important kind of gut check that I have to give myself regularly. But I would be lying if I said it wasn't a thing that just kind of messes you up for a good week after it happens.
I had and the two, like, between TikTok and Facebook, my two most viral things are stupid things that have no effect on the ministry that I'm doing. Right. And I'm like, I'll make something dumb, and I'm like, man, if this was attached to my ministry, I'd be really grateful. Do you remember, I think it was a song by Bad and Bougie, or it was something, it was like, people were making memes of raindrop, drop top. It's like, I made one of "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" It's like, raindrop, drop top. Oh George, not the livestock. 78,000 shares in a week. In like Facebook terms, I was like, oh, great. Like, but so success in the things that aren't necessarily kingdom focused are easily distracting, but not fruitful. Past just that connection, like, what do you feel like the most fruitful thing you do is?
I mean, I think the most fruitful thing that I think that Checkpoint does is so we end every nerdy sermon, every stream, every podcast, anything that we do, we try to end it with 3 things that we believe to be true about every single person that is watching, listening, etc., whatever you want to put behind the particular piece of media that it is. And this was intentional from day one, and we have made sure to keep doing it. We always end it with, God loves you, we love you, you matter. And those are going to be the three things that if you know anything about Checkpoint, I want to make sure you know those three things. I want you to memorize those three things. And I want it to be almost synonymous. If I could change our name to that, maybe I would, because I want that to be what you think of when you think of Checkpoint. And I think that that message in particular was so crucial to our nature as a church plant, because I didn't want to be a church plant that was more of a church transition where people would go to the next new and hot and exciting thing. I wanted to genuinely reach new people. And so whenever I planted, I was like, well, I need to reach people that don't know that they matter. I need to reach people that have heard from Christians that they don't matter to God. And I need to tell them that that's wrong and that I'm an ordained pastor telling them that they do. And so that was an incredibly important feature that we've held strong on for almost 5 years now. And so I think that is probably the most important thing to me that we've done, is we have consistently and unabashedly been a genuinely welcoming community that has hopefully pushed the marker a little bit on letting people know that we really do believe those three things to be true about them. We had one comment. So I have a whole spiel because, I have had to become a streamer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have the spiel, but there's one thing that I say that we believe these three things to be true about every single one of you out there. And then I say, whether you believe in God, don't believe in God, go to church, don't go to church, hate God or hate church, I still believe these to be true. And somebody in the comments was a little smarmy of the Has Been video and was like, thank you for giving me permission to hate God. And they were being, a little tongue in cheek, but I responded to their comment in a video and was like, yeah, I did. Like, I didn't give you permission exactly, but I sure did name it, that it's okay that you hate God and that God still loves you despite that. And that you matter despite that. And that there is still grace abundant for you despite that. And that's an important point. And so, it's things like that, but it's making sure that I don't want to always necessarily be like saying the radical thing, but there are certain things that I think are extremes that we should exemplify and let people know that we really are living a holy and set apart life. And a part of that holy and set apart life is that we really do believe in a God that died for all of our sins, and a God that does offer grace for all, that atones everything, including a hatred before we understand what we're even doing. And do I deep dive into the theology of it every time I say it? No, but I say it because it gets people's attention, and hopefully lets them know that maybe if it's just in the back of their mind, they know in that moment that they truly do matter.
And that's the kind of stuff that will have lasting, like, triggers and memories for people when they have the fears and doubts and things. I had at that same Has Been con that I was at, I had a mom just burst into tears at my booth because she looked down at my little sticker display, and I'd made a VeggieTales centric sticker that just had a tomato, and in the tomato it says, "God made you special and he loves you very much." And just because for the VeggieTales fans that were throwback people there, and she read that, she's like, I haven't heard this in so long, and just started bawling. Because she's like, and we just got into a conversation about, she's like, I always believed that. I was like, I knew a animated tomato was telling me, but I believed it. And when people can come to believe that, I think it's probably one of my turning points of just realizing the effectiveness of what this type of ministry can do is we were at and I've mentioned this one a lot. It's just like one of those core memory moments was there's a young lady cosplaying as Deku. We were at the biggest show in North Carolina at that point. Well, maybe not at that point, but GalaxyCon Raleigh at that time. There was a street preacher outside condemning everybody that walked in, and telling them, if they cosplay, they're going to hell. If you go into that building, you're going to hell, et cetera, et cetera. And this young lady came up to me and in tears, ruining her little green makeup that was, around her eyes and everything. She's like, I just need to know if God actually hates me. And still, that was 5 years ago, and we're still connected via Instagram, and her life choices and where she's at, don't always line up with everything I'm sharing, but she still connects with that. And I think that's one of the I think that's why con life and so much of online life is people just want to find places they feel like they actually are welcomed, not just told that they're welcomed. Um,
Absolutely.
and that makes a big deal. So if that's what you feel like you do like most fruitful, what just to ask you this, and what do you feel like has been your like not necessarily biggest fail, but of just like tried it, it's not the right route,
Oh
like
yeah.
have you had any of those?
I really love the idea of streaming video games for the purpose of Bible study. I really like that idea, and it just doesn't work. We've tried it so many times. I've brought it back so many times. I have been so intentional about doing it in different ways and shapes and forms, and it just plain old doesn't work. We kicked off our ministry back in 2020 by playing one of my favorite games of all time, Undertale, and we played Undertale together on stream, and then I invited them to a Zoom call where we would talk about the kind of Bible study themes that I brought up during that time. And nobody came on Sunday because of course they didn't, because I was asking them to go from an anonymous chat box to a Zoom call over the course of 4 days. Like that was way too big of an ask. And I know that now. But then I tried again with Life is Strange and tried to make it a little bit different where they come to our Discord and just kind of engage in it. It never worked. And so what we wound up pivoting to was these nerdy sermons where I will, instead of expecting somebody to play through the entirety of a game or watch the entirety of a show with us, instead I just kind of present a theme from the show, game, or fill in the blank, and then present a biblical truth that's typically pretty light, but nonetheless, it's a passage of scripture and it is exegeted well. And then I use those two things in tandem to kind of tell a good story that tells us how we can live more Christ-like today. And that is what turned out to be something very much more formative than the failure of asking people to do the hard work of study and exegesis live with me. That just never panned out as I wanted it to. And I still have dreams for that to be like a thing that could be done, but it just has not worked yet. I have like strains of thought. So whenever I might be playing a game live, I'll say something that brings a scripture to mind or brings a truth to mind or something along those lines. But the days of trying to do an intentional Bible study stream, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for our community anyway. I know some people will do not just a game, but they'll just bring up scripture and read through scripture on a stream. And even that is just not our steez. It doesn't work for the environment that we've got going on. And that's no shade to those that do. But our people are still dealing with the hurt and the trauma so bad that they just want to work through some of the basics and start to learn how to live a holier life before they're ready to really do the hard work of diving through the scriptures. We're just about to start a Bible study, and it's totally on Discord. It's totally asynchronous, and we're just going to use the Revised Common Lectionary and read 4 passages together a week and talk about it as we can. But that's taken us almost 5 years to get to the point that we have a large enough group that's ready to start talking about just intentional study of the scriptures beyond viewing them in the light of a trending video game or anime. It took a lot of time, but we've gotten to the point that now I feel like we're able to do it a little more.
Okay. One thing that I saw you post about recently, and I thought was just really neat. Tell people about your I'm gonna call them the wrong things, but the boxes you're putting together of the elements and
Yeah.
things.
It's the checkbox. I love puns. I really like puns. I like anything that is even slightly punny. And so Checkpoint sending out the checkbox brings me a lot of joy. So whenever we started, like I mentioned, we're a church plant. And so unapologetically from day one, I've wanted to be a church. In the UMC, we have these things called extension ministries. We have fresh expressions. We have all sorts of ways that church can kind of happen in a church adjacent way. But I kind of have an ulterior motive of like, I want to prove to the UMC at large that digital ministry is possible. And that digital church planting is possible. And so from the beginning, I've had the intentionality of like, well, if the church can do it, then we can do it too. And we've managed to really recreate the church experience as a whole. except for the two things that we had trouble with, which were the sacramental authority things. We were having trouble with communion, and we still have trouble with baptism. And so we were reaching a point of like, we need to do something. People want communion. We didn't have anybody that was a new believer that wanted to be baptized. We maybe have had people that are like expressing interest in reaffirming within the circle of Checkpoint because they feel like they've renewed their faith. But for the most part, like that's not been a concern, but communion was. And so what we started to talk about was, well, what is communion? How does that work? And what can we do to make it meaningful? And so we practiced a couple times within some of our leadership of like, well, what if we just get together and you bring something that's juice-like and something that's bread-like, and we just come up with some kind of liturgy and do some kind of thing, and we try to make it feel like communion. And it was okay. It felt all right. It didn't really have any kind of like transcendent experience to it. I didn't really feel like, at the end of the day, what I felt like, it felt like we were trying to do what a brick and mortar church does online. And that's never been our style. We want to do what feels natural for the group that's being built there while still honoring the sacramental expectations of remembering Christ's sacrifice and living into the body of Christ. So we're like, well, what does that mean? How can we celebrate the unity of communion? And so what we decided on was the checkbox. We wanted to have all of the elements of the bread and the juice sent from our central location of this office that I'm in right now. This is the space where we stream from. This is the space where we gather. We wanted some kind of tangible element to it. And so I started to send out the juice and the bread. And I also would send out a handwritten note or a little gift or some candy or some snacks or some, whatever that I could come up with, some Chex Mix or trail mix or anything that I had nearby. And I would send them in these little boxes in a way that might make people feel like, oh, my pastor knows me. My pastor sent this to me, and this is coming directly from the space that we've gathered for the past several years. And so that was half the battle, is that we wanted to have some way to create a tangible expression within our digital church. And then we revamped the liturgy. So it's still the same old liturgy. We're still doing the epiclesis. We're blessing the elements. We're doing all the things that the United Methodist Church expects of us within our kind of rites and rituals. But we've also added an element where I broadcast on like a Zoom call, on a Discord call, I broadcast our logo. And after we've already blessed the elements, I ask everyone, traditionally during the time that you would come up and actually get the bread and juice, I ask everyone to place their thumb or their hand or whatever, if they're using a phone or a screen, place their hand or their thumb on the symbol. And then I just read out almost like a poem, just a short little homily where I kind of express that right now we are all touching the same broadcast symbol from one space. By all intents and purposes, in this moment, we are literally connected via a broadcast symbol. We are touching the exact same space at the exact same time. I say that it's the closest thing we can experience to holding hands while we take communion. And then I asked them to this is the body broken for you, and this is the blood shed for you. And we consume the elements there together as we are holding hands via the symbol. And so that's what I mean by like, I didn't want to just recreate the church experience, but instead I wanted to live into what is a calling of digital ministry. What does it mean to be people who connect better over the internet than we've ever connected in person? Because Lord help me, if I have to go to another thing in person, I'm the most uncomfortable one in the room. And I've found people that are just like that have the same sense of social anxiety, but you put me in a chat box and I'm going to be an absolute social butterfly. And so what does it mean to not just let those people gather and live the same experience, but instead to live the experience in the way that edifies and builds up the body of digital people gathered? And so that's been a really intriguing experiment. We continue to work with it and expand upon it. We've used it now as a form of not just the checkbox is always free, so we don't charge anyone for the elements. We do give people the option to cover postage if they'd like to, but then we are trying to use it now as also a means of further celebration and also sustainability of the thing. And so if people want to pay a little extra for a premium box, we'll still ship them the elements for free if they want them. But if they want a little special gift, then they can, and we can take an extra donation there. But that's just another means by which we're able to further experience some kind of tangibility. And we started having these Man and Mingle and DLC events where we have special guests that'll come on and talk to us about things and help us work through things. And I try to theme the box around those things so that it's even deeper of a level of community that we're creating. So yeah, it's been a fascinating thing, and we're about 6 months into it at this point, and people just keep on signing up more and more. They get excited for it. They're looking forward to it. They just express to me how special it makes them feel in that moment, how connected it makes them feel in that moment. And most importantly for me and the powers that be as a church formation, we're feeling more like the church than we ever have before, because we are truly taking that sacrament together twice a month. I know some churches that take it every 6 months. We take it twice a month. So, I mean, we're living into that church experience and trying to really do something special there.
On the church connection level, do you have any hesitancy being attached to a specific denomination? Like, do you feel like Checkpoint's attached to a specific denomination, or that's just where you come from? Or like what's your feelings there?
Yeah, so we are a church plant out of the United Methodist Church.
That's what I thought, but just checking. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we express it. I'm very much, we're a connectional church. And so we're very much like a umbrella kind of experience where we have this big tent of a conference that is global. And then, of course, we have conference structures throughout the United States and regionalization and all that. And then we also have local conferences, and then we have the districts, and then we have the churches. And so it's a not hierarchy, but it is a really powerful system of checks and balances that I'm appreciative to be a part of. And obviously, I'm appreciative enough that I pursued ordination within this place, right? So I definitely respect the kind of discipline that it provides.
Do you ever get any negative feedback from people that are like denominationally attached to other places, or do you just kind of like miss all that?
Do you mean like within the UMC or outside of UMC?
Like people that like might be interested in Checkpoint, but like, oh, well, my grandmother's a Baptist, so like
we are thoroughly ecumenical. I think we have more people that react whenever they find out we're UMC, but I acknowledge the elephant in the room that we've had a rough couple of years in the news, right? And so there's a chance that people have seen an article or have seen a mischaracterization or have seen some drama about the splinter and that kind of thing. And they get uncomfortable. And so I try my best to acknowledge that when I can, but I also am very clear with them that like, I'm not here to tell you, like, if you're going to join our Discord, you better be joining the United Methodist Church. Like that's far be it from me to try and set those kind of expectations. If I only wanted to reach Methodists, then I would be defying that purpose of the whole reaching people outside of the church thing that I, am trying to do. Yeah, of course, I want to encourage people to explore the same discipline and the same discoveries that I've made within my denomination, but I'm never going to turn anyone away. I think more people probably turn themselves away than I would ever turn them away.
With the future of Checkpoint, what do you have a desire for that you don't feel like you have the bandwidth or capability for right now?
So many things. That's the endless question, because I don't know if you've ever taken the, what is it called? The Strength
Finders. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know if you've taken that or not, but I am a strong ideation visionary. I am like, I got ideas for days. I can keep coming up with things, and I have such a strong vision for Checkpoint. And the only thing holding me back is those hours on the page. And like I said, I'm very good at boundaries. And so that only makes it that much more difficult, is that I'm not going to give beyond my means, but who boy could I? And like, who boy do I see some possibilities? If I could dream a dream of Checkpoint, what I really want is I want us to be so full of communal experience that we are able to have somebody that is the Discord pastor, that is the Twitch pastor, that is the YouTube pastor. We have people that are there to serve that community intentionally with their full selves, because I am divided between three major communities that we've chosen at this point, of YouTube, Discord, and Twitch. And that is hard. Like I said, if we have a 150 people limit, then obviously I'm way overboard if you consider all three of those combined. And I feel like all three of those communities are so warranting of the reminder that God loves you, we love you, matter, but I'm not able to give it to them to my maximum capacity. So that would be the real dream for me, would be staffing to the point that we're able to adequately serve the people that we have. And I think we're doing the best we can with what we've got with volunteers and with myself. But any other church like this, you would see just a flood of staffing, and a long list of people that are serving this community professionally as professional Christians, and we don't have the bandwidth there.
Do you feel like, so you don't have to get into too many specifics if it's a taboo or anything. You are fully funded. Are you fully funded as a UMC pastor?
So we're a plant. And so the way that works is we essentially have a grant. And that grant lasts for about 5 years on the grant cycle. And so we're near the end of it. And it's a sliding scale. And so we had 100% funding for a few years, and since it's waned. And so we still have plenty of other grants that we're tapping into. We have ties that are supporting us from within the community. We have Twitch payments. Now we're a YouTube partner. If we can get that pin in the mail, then we can get support there as well. And we're doing these check boxes. We're experimenting with new ways of sustainability. But as far as things are concerned, the expectation of us is that we are fully sustainable. Is that we aren't needing these grants. And while the UMC is more than supportive of it, and there's also extension, beyond the UMC of people who are equally supportive of it, it just becomes a real challenge to figure out how are we going to make this thing. Like I said, I want to prove that digital ministry is possible. I don't want to prove that it's possible by donors. I want to prove that it's possible by the community that exists. And that's a tough thing to experience. That's a tough thing to make happen. Because I know church plants that are 15 years old that are still figuring out how to sustain. And that's just the reality of, I know churches that have existed for 100 years and are figuring out how to sustain. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it is a thing that I'm firmly committed to figuring out how we can make sure this works. Ideally, what I'd want to do eventually is charter. So chartering within our structure means that we would get a board and membership, and we would become our own 501c3 and have an official representation as a church tax exempt people. And for us to do that, we have to get to a critical size and sustainability that we're able to do those things. And while we're there in a lot of ways, we're not there in all the ways. And that's a challenge until we can get there. But at that point, not only would we, as the part of the connectional system that is the UMC, not only would we be expected to support the pastors that we have and the operation costs, we would also be expected to give back into a thing that we call apportionments. And so we would be expected to pay in to the big tent that is the UMC so that we can do more ministry as a connection. And so it's like, it's a far way off. But it's stories like the Has Been Hotel stories. It's stories like those comments. It's the reminders of the good ministry that we're doing that kind of gives me the energy to keep pushing forward and explore new options of how we're going to make this work, because I just believe in this ministry with everything that I have.
Do you, you don't have to share it, but do you have a number in mind of what it would take for you to bring other staff on?
Ooh. No, I don't. I wish that I did. We're really at the point where we do have a budget. We've officially kind of drafted what we've done the past 4 years and reflected on it and seen like, okay, here's our averages. Here's what we need to sustain. And then of course we have my kind of mandated salary via the conference and the structure that says, all right, you're an ordained elder. This is how much we expect, and Social Security and all that. But we can't reach that yet. And so I feel like how can we support a staff if we aren't quite yet able to meet the expectations that we have set upon ourselves?
Okay.
For me, what it would really come down to would probably be finding a grant and finding a grantor to support a staffing position, which is rare. But I don't think it's impossible. I actually wrote I don't know if I should say, but I wrote to a particular charitable giver about the possibility of like, hey, will you support interns? Like, can you support interns for us? Because nobody else is doing this and I'll train them. You pay them, I'll train them. I don't care. I'll do that work and I'll get the help that I need from it. And so we had one particular college that hopped on that last year. And I just had such a good experience with training up an intern that I was like, I can do this again. And I could do it with 10 of them. Like, let's talk about it. Let's make a staff of interns paid for by a grantor that is in a way supporting the future of ministry. So Who knows? Who knows what people will do and what they'll go with? I'm going to keep writing letters and keep on talking to people and rubbing elbows and saying that this is the future that is possible for the church. And whether it's the future or not, it is making a huge impact here and now. And so we need to celebrate that and equip people with what we've got.
So all the vision, all the praises you've seen, just ask this. Um, where is your biggest backlash been or criticism been? Because I know that like for still, I know where we're at, but I also know that, you mentioned digital church to, some people you're going to get much less than love. So where does that sit for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully, the UMC for the most part has been very supportive. But I do think that if I experience pushback, it is ironically from the Christians. And it frustrates me to no end that the church just insists on eating itself and insists on putting others down instead of celebrating the work that the Holy Spirit is doing in ways that we don't understand. And so that's a real stressor for me. And I have to do my best that I possibly can to let those things kind of go in one ear and out the other whenever we have somebody that's a particularly powerful naysayer. If they're trying to distract from the real call of what we're doing because of something that they disagree with, then we're doing too much important work to let that drag us down and keep us distracted from the mission that we really have in front of us. And so any backlash that we receive, I kind of try to receive it as generously as I can. I respond when and if I am able. And at a certain point, I think you got to kind of kick the dust off your boots and move on from some people that are simply just not going to be swayed. I can continue to tell stories and I can continue to tell things that are going well. And if those folks want to hear those stories and see the evidence of ministry, then they'll have to open their eyes. But otherwise, what more can I do?
So, I mean, and it's on a very small scale thing of like, I hosted a Comic-Con at my church building, in person in September. And we did it like we had a threefold goal when we did it was one, bless and support the artist community. So we made it all the artists, all the vendors were free to set up stuff. There were no fees with that. We wanted to provide an outreach space to connect with our community more. And we wanted to just try and reach different people than we had ever reached. And so I pitched it to I work with a pastoral team of about 7 guys, like across different areas and of 3 different like church locations. And pitched it, said, "Hey, I'm doing this. I'm not asking a lot of you. I just need you to show up and I need you to support." So all of my staff, all of the guys I work with, are like, go for it. All of them are muggles, and that's fine. I didn't expect a ton from them, but they gave it their best and they really served out. And we ended up like our physical building is not a huge building. It's like not like our at one time capacity is about 150 in our sanctuary space or auditorium space. So we do 2 services on Sundays, and because we can't hold a ton, we ended up with like 30 vendors and artists. And I'm not saying it was a perfect day, but it was a really good day. And the thing that we saw was that we had 248 people that attended that aren't a part of our congregation at all, that have never set foot in our building before, never connected with us before. And I was on such a high from like just the fruit that I was seeing with this. And I found that one of the people in my congregation who I've given the most effort to, serve the most with, like literally right now when I get off the phone with you or get off the Zoom with you, I have to call that person because they had to go to the hospital this week and I need to check up on them. But I found that one person had been going over my head as far as he could go to try and make sure it wasn't allowed to happen. Like shaking my hand on Sunday and then like, we can't do this. It's wrong. But like, and they're like, be quiet.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's so hard to even take even if people just have a different opinion, it's hard to take when people are just shooting shots at what you find so valuable, even if they don't get the vision. Um, how do you what's your process like for, not letting that hit you when it does happen?
I literally just did a nerdy sermon on pretty much this exact topic. I was talking about X-Men 97 and kind of the backlash that people have had to it. And I just talked a little bit about this sentiment that we have to just tear each other apart. And often the people that come at me for the things that we talk about, whenever we talk about TV shows and cartoons and anime, people come at me all the time talking about anime is of the devil. I'm so tired of it. But what I do is more often than not, those people are doing it from a very spiritual stance. And I just assume that they kind of they use the phrase "the enemy" a lot. They're the people that are very much kind of focused on these dark and spiritual forces and spiritual warfare. And I remind people because they also typically like Lewis. So I say, "Do you remember? Do you remember what Screwtape told Wormwood about not getting involved? Because often the humans will tear themselves apart without the devil and the demons ever having to show up." And so I throw that story in pretty regularly to just kind of hopefully get their attention of like, if you really believe that there's spiritual warfare going on, I just think that it's so much more evidenced in the deceit and the kind of degradation of our own desire to tear each other to pieces, and to lambast and to go out in public whenever we've been given instructions of how to handle dissent. We've been given instruction of like, reach out in private, then bring a powerful leader with you, then bring them before the church, and then treat them like a tax collector, which still, that doesn't say necessarily too much to throw them out. We've been given instructions on how to deal with people that we disagree with, and yet we instead become sneaky and we become secretive and we become harmful. And so we have a rule in our community. We use John Wesley's general rules to do good, to do no harm, and to strive to grow. And so do no harm is one that I throw pretty often into the faces of the naysayers. Is I say, let's think about how we're doing harm here. As soon as people start throwing out ad hominems about some people groups or about some of the shows that we watch or anything like that, I say, hey, look, that's a direct example of do no harm. I'm deleting that message. And that's that's a ground rule that I have for myself and for the conversations that we have. I'm open to any discussion. There's nothing that's off the table in our community. I'll take any questions. But what I'm not going to accept is people doing harm to each other, because I think that is, if you are a spiritual warfare proponent, that is a direct example of some warfare being done in our hearts and us tearing each other apart.
When you mentioned the tax collector thing too, like, because that passage and the passage also about, if you remember that you have something against your brother, leave your gift at the altar, those two. But one of the things that really hit me just kind of studying with the tax collector thing is, when it says to treat them as a tax collector, I feel, and this is just as my reflection on it, I'm guaranteeing anything past that, but like, one of the things that you deal when you treat someone as a tax collector is you treat them like they don't know better. Like, if you've tried to explain it and you've addressed it personally, it's just like they're not at a point where they can actually understand the spiritual end of things right now, because they are bound up in worldly ways. And it's just like, okay, they don't understand the language. They're not getting this. So it's like, and rather than treating them like an enemy, treat them like, okay, you just don't get it. And that's helped me a little bit. So I want to be a good respecter of your time and everything, but it's anything else about Checkpoint you want to share with us? Anything you want to tell us that we should take away from the heart of this?
Sure. So specifically to the audience of this podcast, because I think they'll get something out of this. At some point in our ministry, we acknowledged that we were creating these nerdy sermons, but that not everyone that watches these nerdy sermons needs a church. Not everyone that watches these because they really want to hear about X-Men 97 wants to go join the Checkpoint Church community. Maybe they're already a part of Love Thy Nerd. Maybe they're a part of the Faith and Fandom universe. Maybe they are already a part of their own local church, or they have a small group or a young adult group or a life group, fill in the blank. But we wanted to create some way for people to have the conversations that we're having in our Discord community in their own communities. And so we created this thing called Jesus Loves Nerds. It is a Bible study curriculum. So if you go to jesuslovesnerds.com, which is a URL that I'm still amazed that I was able to get,
Right.
but jesuslovesnerds.com, you can go and access, we have a Substack feed, and you can access every sermon that we've written since that launched is on there and has a curriculum that coordinates with it. We've got questions, we've got prayers, we've got, spiritual activity, we've got a group activity, we've got everything that you could possibly need. We've even got, for people that aren't nerds, I try to break down some of the nerdy theological terms that are in there, just to provide some more framework. And so that is what we've created. And I encourage you to use that, bring that to your small groups, especially if you like our nerdy sermons, because it's just an opportunity to dive deeper into those things. And I do want to be totally upfront that we put out one free one every single month, but that this is a subscription that we're also trying to sustain our ministry with. So we're happy to provide it for free once a month, but then we also are hopeful that you'll consider supporting the ministry that we're doing as well if you want a weekly curriculum brought to you with all of our nerdy sermons. So that's something that is out there. And I'll tell you a secret. If you want to know a secret, I'm not supposed to tell this. It's kind of like that moment in The Incredibles where like the boss doesn't want Bob to tell everybody the secrets of the insurance agency. If you subscribe to our Substack, you will get access to all of the ones we've ever released. And I don't know if you've copy and pasted them. So that's all that I'll say. Just do with that information what you will. I don't want you to do that because I want you to support Checkpoint and I believe in it. But they do all become available then. And I don't think Substack has done anything to prevent that. So that's what I'll say about Jesus Loves Nerds. And if you do consider doing that, please let me know, because I would love to support you and shout you out and, do whatever I can to celebrate that you're taking advantage of that resource that we're creating. But wanted to make sure that I mentioned that.
That's awesome. And they can find you at Checkpoint Church everywhere.
Yep. Linktree/Checkpoint Church, Linktree/Nerd Pastor Nate. Those are going to be my two feeds that should have pretty much everything that we're doing. If you want to get involved at Checkpoint Church, like I mentioned, Twitch, Discord, YouTube, those are our three main platforms. If you go find us on Facebook, you're going to see one post every 4 or 5 months. And that's, just, we don't focus on all the others. I can't. So if you want to experience us, Twitch, Discord, YouTube, that's where you're going to find the real meat of our community.
You got to know what your bandwidth is, man.
That's right.
Before we bounce, we'll let you know you can find more of these interviews over at lovethynerd.com/faith and fandom, from Nerd Pastor Nate to professional wrestlers to horror authors to voice actors. We've had some really cool folks on this content for the past year. You can find those there first. Also, to let you know that our podcast, along with several other Love Thy Nerd podcasts, are now streaming on the Glue Network, GLU Network, which is a streaming platform available on Roku and smart TVs, as iPhones, Androids, etc. There's an app, the GLU app, which unlocks it, but the whole purpose is to unlock inspirational value of faith-centric programming and partnering with Christian creators like Love Thy Nerd and Faith and Fandom, etc. So if you want to check that out, you can find this podcast and other ones over there. But Nate, thanks for taking time to talk with me and chat with me, and I still think one of my favorite things of last year was randomly running into you at a con, like
right
in the middle of middle of nowhere, North Carolina. I was just like, wait, what? That was pretty cool. Are you still part of connecting with them there?
I'll go back again this year, but yeah, I'm not too far from there. And so it's a good spot to be, even if it is in the middle of nowhere. We have a cheesecake place now and it's really good.
That's awesome. I think that day is the day that Five Iron Frenzy is going to play in Atlanta. So I'm going to respectfully bow out of that show because I miss Five Iron Frenzy and I'm going to go see them there. But thanks. And so everybody, thanks for taking time to listen. Make sure you check out Nate and all of his fantastic content. And we hope to see you soon.